Blog Talk Radio.
Mi chiamo Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut, Neye Ujirada, Medinde Ujirabo Kwesi, Renen Akan. Akwamumana Maruka Etipimu Ojirabo. That means greetings to all Afurakani people, Afuraitkaitnut people, meaning Africans, Black people. Today is Ojira Day. My name is Ojirabo Kwesi, Renen Akan. Ojirabo of the Kwamu Nation in North America. Yet I say we thank you for tuning in once again. We are going to put some links in the chat room. First, we're going to put the link for the Sankofa Wodin article. We're going to get to that. And we're also going to put the link for the Nhoma page. And within that, we want to go to the Uben Sheng section on the Nhoma page, which is simply going to download the Uben Sheng book, the ebook version, and we're going to get into that. And, okay, just want to send out a couple of messages right quick. Make sure everybody knows that we're on. And, of course, we have our 3 shows per week, weekly. Joada, which is Mondays, we have Akan Nanasom, ancient, authentic Akan ancestral religion, where we deal specifically with the Akan tradition on Joada and Akan Nanasom. Then, of course, today is Ojira, and we'll get into the information we're dealing with today, dealing with Nanasom, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut, ancestral religion, and purification. Jira means to purify. Ojira means purification. It also means a celebration of purification. It means that in the Akan language, it also means that in the language of ancient Kemet, and we post those Medutu, those hieroglyphs. As you see the images on the front page of the channel, the Blog Talk channel, you'll see Jira, meaning purification, but also a celebration of purification. You'll see that in the language of ancient Khanat and Kamit, Nubia, and Egypt. And, of course, you see the same terminology with the exact same 2 meanings in the Akan language because, of course, we migrated from ancient Khanat, the Khan or Akan land, a title of Nubia, reestablished culture in the empire of Ghana or Kana, Akana, and then we moved from there about 1,000 years ago to the forest belt to where Ghana and Ivory Coast are today. And we continue to practice the culture, continue to, engage the ritual practices, speak the language. And, of course, some of us were forced from those regions into the Western Hemisphere during the Umusu Okesi, the Great Perversity, the enslavement era. So we still have the same culture, the same ritual practices, same language. So this is why we still utilize this terminology with respect to Jida or Ojira, meaning purification. We say Ojira purifies through purification. Ojira operationalizes Nanasom. Through purification, you operationalize your practice of Nanasom, authentic Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut, ancestral religion. No matter what form ancestral religion takes, Akan, Yoruba, Bambara, Dogon, Bakongo, whatever it is, whatever group you come from, it's still fundamentally the principles are the same. We attune to the great mother and the great father, supreme being, who are 2 entities who function together as one unit. We attune to them through the agency of the Abosom, the divine forces in nature, and our ancestresses and ancestors who are spiritually cultivated, the Nananom Nsumanpo. In order to do that, to engage the practice of Nanasom or Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut, or African ancestral religion, in essence, we must understand that is defined as the ritual incorporation of divine law and the ritual restoration of divine balance. So through ritual, we incorporate those things, objects, deeds, and entities we need to incorporate in order to harmonize our thoughts, intentions, and actions with divine order, and through ritual, we reject those things, objects, deeds, entities we need to reject or to hate, to repel, so that we can bring balance to our lives and maintain balance within our lives. So the incorporation of law and the restoration of balance through ritual, that is the essence of Nanason, Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut, ancestral religion. And through purification, ODWIRA, we operationalize that process. So this is why we do the show, and the station itself is titled ODWIRA because it deals with purification. That's purification of ourselves individually, our physical bodies, purification of our sunsum, our spirit, purification of our condition socially as Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut people, politically, economically, and just socially in general with regard to Ancestral, what we call nation building, restoration. So that's key to that process. That also includes correction, getting rid of the misinformation that's not only propagated about Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut people in general, but the whites and their offspring are absolute enemies who are spirits of disorder, non-black people. But then we also have within the culture, within the community, people who not only are agents of the whites and their offspring, but then you have other people who promote misinformation, false culture because of ignorance. And it spans across traditional culture, Afrocentrism, Pan-Africanism, all kinds of what appear to be schools of thought. But in reality, you have some people who are deliberately misinforming our people as agents of the whites and their offspring. They're just as much enemies as the whites and their offspring are. And then you have a larger group who are propagating misinformation through pseudo-spirituality, pseudo-metaphysics, trying to blacken up Christianity or Islam or Judaism or Hebrewism or Hinduism or Vedanta, Taoism, atheism, all kinds of nonsense. So we have to engage the purification process internally as well to purge all of that nonsense out and give accurate information. Part of purification is investigation when it comes to this information. Okay. There's a question in the chat room. Can somebody send a message to make sure you can hear, because one person is saying they couldn't hear. If there's a problem, we can correct that. But let us know. Somebody else in the chat room, send a quick message. Can you hear clearly? And if it's only one person having an issue, then you might have to. So one person can hear. So that must mean you might have to either reboot or log out and log back in. That might take care of it. So one piece dealing with purification has to do with investigation. That's one thing that we, in the past, have been conditioned not to do. Ever since enslavement, we've been taught and trained not only to listen to the slave master, the enemy, but then when the so-called slave master put his agent in front of us in the form of the preacher, then we were taught to listen to the preacher. Whatever he says is the divine law. And as long as he says it, and then says it with a little flair, says it with a little charisma, then somehow he must be touched, he must be inspired, he must be telling the truth just by virtue of the way that he's saying it, because nobody can, speak like that with that kind of charisma from the quote-unquote heart unless they were, touched by the spirit, which is, of course, is nonsense. Anybody can speak about anything without notes, with charisma. It doesn't matter. We've all seen people who, study for roles in movies and they give a good performance and a very convincing performance, and it's acting. And just like people can act like that on screen, people can act throughout their daily lives. So what we have been in the past conditioned to do is simply listen to what people say. And if they sound good or sound, quote unquote, like they know what they're talking about, whatever that means to us, and the way we've been conditioned, whatever that means to us, then we simply go along and listen to these individuals who are teaching nonsense. And some of our people, even though they're, PhDs and have careers and consider themselves intelligent, they still fall back into that mode of when somebody talks or speaks with charisma, or somebody is articulate, or things that they write seem to be like they have some knowledge, and we simply listen to what they say and we don't investigate. Part of the purification process is to investigate, and as soon as you do that, you can easily find out who's telling the truth and who is misinforming, who's making up information, who's extrapolating, who's following the whites and their offspring, trying to blacken up nonsense from the whites and their offspring. It's very simple. All we have to do is to investigate, and people are beginning to do that now. It's becoming, it's coming back. It's coming back to our common sense. When you investigate anything that anyone is saying, whether you like the individuals or not, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what their credentials are. Any credential that someone puts forward when it comes to our culture, it comes to our trustery, it comes to our embrace of spirituality, ritual practices, and so forth, any credential that they put forward, whether it's a degree, whether it's experience, whether it's an initiation, all of the credentials mean absolutely nothing. Whether it's time spent, whether it's lineage, whether it's hundreds of years of intergenerational practice, it means nothing. Absolutely nothing. The only people who are experts in our culture, experts in our trustery, experts in our ritual practices are our direct blood ancestresses and ancestors who are spiritually cultivated. You have them within your blood circle. Those are your experts. Anything that anyone says to you that does not comport with what your nananum and samanfu, your spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors have to say, then you reject what those fools say, no matter what their so-called credentials are, and you embrace what your people direct you toward. So once we have that understanding, we don't get swayed by people here who are talking a great deal of nonsense with, very articulately. We don't get swayed by people on the continent who talk a lot of stuff, but very often is misinformed or influenced by Islam or Christianity under the cloak of traditionalism. So you find your focus, which is in your own nkra, your soul, your divine consciousness, your krawa, your ka, your kait, your ori, and so forth, and then you are guided by your direct blood ancestresses and ancestors in your blood circle, in your family. And you get that kind of information, you get direction from them, and anybody else, they better comport with what your people say, or you reject them outright. We can simply investigate the information, the most popular individuals, males and females, individuals, groups, talking about all kinds of forms of spirituality and trustery and Pan-Africanism and revolution and so forth. Investigate, and they will begin to crumble one by one, and then it'll be like a tsunami. So as long as you investigate, you can get the information. And you don't have to have some pseudo-credential to investigate. Again, your people are the expert. So that's what purification deals with. Of course, on Wednesdays, we have a Gua Marketplace Day where we highlight a business, product, service, Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut business owner who is, serving the community through products and services, but also maintains our ancestral values in the process. So these are the 3 shows we have weekly. So what we want to do right now, we're going to pull up Uben Shame, the ancestral summons, and also the Sankofa Deen article, and we're going to be dealing with both of these tonight. So, and also for the people who are guests in the chat room, if you have a question or a comment, then you have to sign in with a username in order to do so. If you don't have a username, you can sign up for one very quickly in Facebook, and then you can, you can communicate in the chat room. If you are on the phone line, just hit the number 1, and then we'll be able to see, that you have your hand raised, and we'll be able to connect with you. If you have any questions or comments from the previous broadcast, or if you listened to the previous broadcast after it was archived, have a question or comment from that, you can ask a question or, pose a question from that as well. We just wanted to make sure we had one message right quick. We wanted to make sure everything was straight with that. Okay. So tonight what we're dealing with is Renen and Renenit, the nature of the reen, the nature of the name. And it's a very critical piece. We're going to get right into it. If you go to the Ubensheng, the Ancestral Summons, that is one of our books, on the Unhoma page, on the Unhoma link, we put it in the chat room. We, of course, have the ebook version of this text. It's a free download. The softcover version we do sell. Just like all of our books, all 15 of our books, we have an ebook. The ebook versions are free, and then the softcover versions we do sell. They range between $8 and $11. So you can download this book right here. We've been sharing the Ancestral Summons. It deals with the nature of ritual practice and the functionality of ritual practice. So first we're going to read a specific section from this text, and then we're going to get into, the rest of the information. This will be found, if you're in the ebook version, of course, you will be going through, this is page 20 on the ebook version. And the title of the text, and hold on one second. Just want to make sure we saw a message up here right quick. Want to make sure it's out here. Just going to send that out right quick, and then we'll get back. Okay. All right. Okay. So the name of this specific text is, or the specific title of this section is, it says, Goddess holds your name, God has your language. So in this particular text, when we first published it, we published it, of course, in English. We were just using the English term, but we're dealing with specific divinities in these different sections. And as we go through the section, you'll understand, and we'll talk about what specific divinities we're addressing. So this section, Goddess holds your name, God holds your language. So it says, energy fathers movement. This is the beginning of creation. Energy before movement contained all vibrations necessary for the coming into being of all things in a passive potency. Goddess, mother's energy. So that first section, energy fathers movement, we're talking about Nun and Nunet, and they give birth to Ra and Ra'et, the creator and creatress. Nun and Nunet, the vibratory energy in the black substance of space. The black substance of space is Ka and Kait. When we talk about goddess, mother's energy, Amen and Amenet are the great father and the great mother, and they give birth to Ka, Kait, Hehu, and Hehu, Nun and Nunet, and then Nun and Nunet give birth to Ra and Ra'et, the creator and creatress of the world. Of course, we've gone through that cosmology in numerous shows. We're not going to go through it in detail here, but this is what we are referencing. So when you go back and read this text, you can reference, for example, in our Anidaho book, where we go into detail about the origin of the term God. We talk about Amen, Amenet, and the whole piece, as well as in our book on the Okra complex, the soul of Akan. But in this section, we say energy fathers movement. This is the beginning of creation. Energy before movement contain all vibrations necessary for the coming into being of all things in a passive potency, Goddess, Mother's energy. Sound is truly primordial. We receive sound, process sound, we reproduce sound. Goddess sustains our form specifies sound. These sounds are our names. When we say sound is truly primordial, again, we go back to Amen and Amenet, when they take the Akinebois form or the animal totem form of the great goose and the great gander, and they cackle and say Ga, Ga at the beginning of creation is set, create the black substance of space and set that black substance in motion with vibratory energy, and it begins to move and so forth. That's the first sounds in creation, the Ga and the Ga, and this is why they are called Ganga, the great cacklers, the great geese, and of course this is the origin of the term Ga or God and so forth. Titles of Amen and Amenet, we go into detail about that in our book, Anidaho. But that's why we say sound is truly primordial. We receive sound initially from Amen and Amenet. We process sound initially from them. We reproduce sound. Goddess sustains our form specifies sounds. These sounds are our names. The goddess we are talking about is Renenet. All movement, vibrations produce sound, yet the product, sound, is merely an audible manifestation, revelation of energy, pre-existent energy. Is the word you speak not already known to you before you allow it to pass from your lips? Did the word not exist prior to your speaking it? Is the spoken word then not a manifestation, revelation of energy, vibrations which were pre-existent in your mind, spirit? Sound is truly primordial. So these are questions the Nanonoman Samafu are posing to us and showing why they're saying that sound is primordial. As spirit vibrates through any form, talking about the great Ba and the great Ba'et, the great spirit, Ra and Ra'et, the creator and creatress, are the great Ba and the great Ba'et, the great divine living energy moving through all created entities in creation. As spirit vibrates through any form, sounds are emitted. We notice the different sounds produced as air vibrates through musical instruments of various shapes. Every musical instrument speaks. Its specific dialect is determined by its form, its use. This is language. So just like we said in the past, if you blow through a trumpet, you get a certain sound. If you blow through a tuba, you get a deeper sound. If you blow through a trombone, you get a different sound. If you blow through a French horn, you get a different sound. The same air from the same set of lungs, but because the form is different, the collection of sound vibrations emanating from that form as the air circulates through it come out different. Okay. So can we not perceive different sound groupings as spirit vibrates through humans of various spirit energetic configurations? Talking about Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut humans only. Does your configuration not emit your true name? Do you not have a language, a primordial language, a language rooted in the product of energy vibrating through your genetic form? What then is your dialect? Does the region in which you live not have an effect on your physiology? Should your natural dialect of the primal language not be a result of your migration to a different region? You have a name, you have a language. Goddess has written the dialect into your very nature. So just like instruments like flutes, trumpets, trombones, tubas, French horns, clarinets, saxophones, and so forth, the same air coming from your same set of lungs, but because the form is different, the collection of sound vibrations that emanate from the instrument are different. Because we have different forms and nobody has your exact form unless you're an identical twin. If you're one of the Ntafo, as we call it in Akan culture, or the Ibeji in Yoruba culture, unless you're an identical twin, nobody has your exact form. So the light, and even with identical twins, it's slightly different, but it's very similar. So the life force energy circulating constantly throughout your form is generating a set a configuration of sound vibrations that is unique unto your form. When you attune to that specific, unique configuration of sound vibrations that are constantly emanating from you just by virtue of the fact that you are alive and you are breathing, and the Ba or Ba'et, divine living energy that uses the breath to get into your system and then get into your bloodstream and so forth and circulate throughout your body. Just by virtue of the fact that that energy is circulating within you as an Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut person constantly, then you have sound vibrations emanating from your unique spirit genetic form. That collection of sound vibrations that's unique unto your form is your true name. So you're constantly emanating your name just by virtue of the fact that you're living and breathing. And when we can attune to those sound vibrations, that unique configuration, and replicate them with our vocal cords, we are enunciating and announcing our actual name. So you're born with a name. And the naming practices of Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut people are built around that concept, around that reality. When we say goddess sustains your form and your form specified sounds, the goddess who sustains that form is Renenet. Our form specified sound specified by the divinity, the male divinity, Renen. So we're going to get into that. All right. And then we talk about the primal language and the dialect of that primal language. So when we talk about moving to different regions, primordial languages, just by virtue of the fact you're alive, constantly emanating sound vibrations, you move to certain regions of Asase Afur, the Earth Mother, that energy has an effect on your body. Even as we know, people living in southern United States, Southwest, it's hotter. People move a little bit slower. Southern drawl, speech is a little bit slower, more laid back and so forth. In the upper Northeast and so forth, when it's colder, people are moving faster. They talk faster, move faster. The energy is faster. They speak faster and so forth. That changes the way the words are spoken. If you were to write down the way they pronounce a certain word because they speak it fast and so forth, and write it down phonetically the way it sounds, and write down the exact same word by someone who's speaking, who's in the South with a Southern drawl, and they extend those vowels a little bit longer. If you were to write it out phonetically, the letters that you would use will be slightly different than the way somebody speaking something quickly in the Northeast would be. So that changes dialect to an extent, because then that becomes a habit. People incorporate it into their speech, and then the way they speak and talk is slightly different, and over hundreds of years or thousands of years, things change. So for example, in the Akan language, you have different dialectical variants of the same term. Oba means female or woman. O-B-A-A, the first A is high, the second A is low. Oba, in comparison, you have Oba, which means he opens. The first A is low, second A is high. O-B-A-A, it's the same spelling, but the shift in sounds yields different meanings. Oba is female, Oba is he opens. But then if you have, that's in the Asante dialect, for example. But in the Akwamu dialect and nkra dialect, instead of saying Oba, we'll say Obea. So the first high A becomes, instead of an I, it becomes an E. So Oba, the Asante and other speakers in that region, Obea for Akwamu and nkra people in that region, we're saying the same thing, but there's a slight dialectical difference. And you have slight differences as well. If you say ODWIRA or Awura for a female who's on a higher level socially, Awura in Asante, in Fanti you would say Ewuraba. There's a slight difference. If you say Afua amongst Akwamu or Asante and Denchira and other people like that, you say Afua or Akua. In Fanti they would say Efua, Ekua, slight dialectical difference. And when you have dialectical differences that become fossilized over hundreds of years or sometimes thousands of years, you'll find a divide, but originally it's the same language. So this is what we're talking about here. So the next piece says the ancestral spirits recognize the dialect of the primordial language they spoke. They recognize it when you call their name in their dialect during libation. They recognize it when you provoke dialogue in their dialect through evocation. Their dialect nourishes them, for it is descended through Afuraitkaitnut from the primordial God language, which is a tonal language. We're talking about the divinity Tahuti now, dealing with speech and so forth. Tonal languages give different meanings for the same word based on the way in which the word is pronounced, in what tone it is spoken. Different tones are different vibrations. Different vibrations yield different meanings. Is this not of God? Talking about that specific divinity, Tahuti, at this point. Are the different phases of creative power not reflective of different rates of vibration, thus yielding different tones, different values, meanings, deities? Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut language resounds divinity. So the different tones are just different rates of vibration. They yield, therefore, different values or meaning. And the differences in the divinities, the way you have fiery divinities, they move, their rates of vibration are faster, they move faster. The cooler divinities, watery divinities and so forth, their energy is a little bit slower, more resolute. So their, the energy moves slower, and the colors that are generated are different than the faster moving divinity. So that's based on energy movement, which generates sound. Then we say, then Samaf will say, you are connected genetically to the ancestral spirit. If the dialect they spoke nourishes and energizes them, should it not nourish and energize you as their descendant, their incarnation? You have a right and responsibility to employ the dialect that was written in you, the name resonating as you. Goddess has a name, God has a language. Speak them if you are of God as God. Proper name and language are energetic. So we were dealing with the nature of the name, talking about a set of vibrations that emanate from you, which are unique to you. And then when we hear those, we receive them, we process them, and we resound them or re-speak them. Our language resounds divinity because we're attuning to the sound vibrations that are emanating from not only Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut, human life, but plant life, animal life, mineral life, and so forth. Okay, so we have a basic understanding of that. Before we go forward, I just want to make sure we didn't have any comments in the chat room. Okay. And we're going to go up right quick. Just want to make sure we didn't miss something here. Just give me a second. All right. One more section from the Ubin Shang on page 19, talking about the nature of the deities, but it also gets into the nature of sound. And this is going to be key once again. So this one says, God has emissaries, representatives in creation. Now we're talking about Goddess God here is Amen, Aminet, and Amen, or Nyamewa, Nyame and Akan, has emissaries, representatives in creation. We're talking about the nature of the deities, but it also gets into the whole piece dealing with sound, which is key. Movement presupposes energy. Movement, energy vibrations, reveal sound. Such vibrations are essential to the manifestation of time. Because as soon as sound begins, the first sound waves are released by Amen and Amenet, vibrations up, down, expansive, contractive, expanding, contraction, expanding, contracting, and so forth, back and forth, back and forth. Now there's measurement, now there's time, and so forth. Creation is governed by time. Time orders, measures the cyclical manifestation of power. As soon as the sound vibrations are released, they expand and contract. There's a cyclical manifestation. Time orders that manifestation. This is creation. Time orders, measures the cyclical manifestation of power that things may come into existence. All things produce emanations which are reflective of power, which is governed by time. Vibratory waves may manifest as longer or shorter. Vibratory rates may be faster or slower. From beginning to ending to beginning, from light to dark to light, from expansion to contraction back to expansion, all wavelengths, all rates come into being as various representatives of creative power. Every representative or phase of creative power vibrating through space generates its own sound. Sound imbues space with colors corresponding to the nature of the vibration. Is sunlight not broken into a band of colors, a rainbow, when refracted by rain or mist? So when we talk about sound vibrations, when sound, a collection of energy, movement, moves through space, it generates its own sound. Energy generates sound. So, of course, if you have a rope and you whip it around in the air, then you all of a sudden begin to hear a whistling sound. You can replicate that sound with your lips and by blowing, and you can reproduce that whistling sound, that pitch. Movement generates those sound vibrations. If you have a string and it's very taut, and then you pluck it and make it vibrate, the vibrations, like a guitar, generates sound vibrations. So the movement, the vibration, generates sound. If a car is going by very fast, or a bird or something like that, you hear that sound zip by you. And you can replicate that sound with your vocal cords because you hear that sound once the movement occurs. So when the sound happens, the sound vibrations imbue space with colors corresponding to the nature of the vibration. So those fast-moving sounds generating red burning energy, or orangish burning energy, or yellowish energy, and so forth, and then you have some slower-moving vibrations, generating cooler, darker colors and so forth. Sound vibrations imbue space with colors, but the colors correspond to the nature of the vibration, how fast or slow the vibrations are, how large or small the vibratory rates are. Collections of sounds are groups of various vibrations, together generating geometric patterns in space. Rapid movement, vibration not generate heat. Is heat not expansive? Does expansion not call forth contraction or cooling? Are expansion and contraction not essential as dynamics of form? Are heat and cooling not essential as dynamics of form on the physical plane? So the expansion and contraction of energy generates heat and cooling, expanding and contracting are the dynamics of form. Therefore, sound vibrations, depending on their nature, their movement, their speed, their size, generate heat, cooling, expansion, and contraction, and generate form and creation. Of course, if you've taken a microscope and looked at a snowflake, this is a generation of a geometric form in space based on the movement of energy. Okay, so every representative phase of energy emanating from spirit, meaning Ra and Ra'et, has a creative function through time, is its personality, a deity, a phase of consciousness emanating from the divine source of all consciousness, which is Amen, Amen. Each deity is either male or female, predominantly expansive or contractive in power, character, behavior, whose vibrations generate higher or lower pitched sound, feminine or masculine voices, thereby revealing its own name. Then we go further. The form, vehicle through which spirit operates determines its personality, consciousness. Is there not one source of air on earth which all humans, Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut people we're talking about, share? Is there not one spirit, Ra and Ra'et, by which all created things have life? When spirit is housed in a line, does it not manifest as the peculiar personality and consciousness of the line? When spirit is housed in a dove, does it not manifest as the peculiar personality and consciousness of the dove? When spirit is housed in a human, talking about the Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut human, does it not manifest as a personality and consciousness peculiar to that person? What of the personality and consciousness of the forces which determine the form of all things? the goddesses, the gods, the Abosom, the Orisha, the Vodou. What of these various divine representatives of divine power operating through the medium of space, who generate their own sounds, quote-unquote voices, colors and geometric patterns, images and forms, their own genders, powers, male expansive, female contractive, names, personalities, behaviors. Who speaks against the goddesses and gods? Are you not consciousness as a physical form, pattern after an image of various colors with your own voice, gender, name, personality, behavior? Goddess, God, or Amenet, Amen has emissaries, representatives in creation. Are you of Goddess, God, or Amenet, Amen? So what we're showing in this particular piece is the nature of the forces in nature, the divinities, the spirits that animate the sun, moon, stars, earth, mother, oceans, rivers, black substance of space, fire, thunder and lightning, wind, and so forth, showing that they are individual entities with their own form, with their own energy, which imbues space with their own set of colors, with their own voice, expansive or contractive, higher or lower pitch, with their own gender, with their own personality and consciousness. And we show that, but also we show that because we have those same kinds of qualities as a human being, and there's a difference between a human being and a divinity, we are not the same. The deities, the gods, and the gods are the deities. Human beings are human beings. Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut people only, of course. We have our own value and function and place in the created universe as human beings, just like the deities have their own place. There's no need for us to try to say, oh, we're gods and goddesses. That comes from people who psychologically and spiritually feel inadequate and inferior. They want to feel good about themselves, so they run around saying, the black man is God, the black woman is God, I'm a goddess, and all that nonsense because they're just trying to make themselves feel good. The deity who animates the sun, that's a force in nature. You don't have the capacity to make the sun generate the kind of heat and power that it does. We are cells within the great divine body of the Supreme Being. It's like the cells in your body are children of your great body, your great being. The organs in your body regulate order in the body. Your cells are the children of the organs. Your heart cell is a child of the heart deity. So that's this parent divinity. And when it serves heart functions, it serves the whole body at the same time. The heart cell, yes, is a child of the heart, but it is not the heart itself. It's not an organ, it's a cell. The liver cell is not a liver itself, it is a cell of the liver. The liver is the being, the entity, the regulator of order in a certain capacity in the body. The cell is a servant of the liver, but when it serves the liver, it's serving the whole body at the same time. So the organs within the great divine body of Amenet Amen are the deities, the Orisha, the Abosom and Akan, the Orisha, Yoruba, the Vodou, Afon and Ebe, Ntorotu, and we use, in ancient Kemet, of course, we use those same terms in Akan as well. So, and we are cells within those great divine organs. So there's value within Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut humanity, and when you understand who you truly are, you don't seek to step outside of your role in creation to try to be something else because you think your role in creation is inferior as an Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut human because the whites and their offspring who are inferior recognize their inferiority and they want to pass that depression on to us. We don't have that kind of depression and anxiety about being a human being because we know there's value in that. There's no value in being a melanin recessive cracker, but there's value in being a melanin dominant Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut human being. So when we talk about this association of having a specific form, generating a certain kind of energy unique to us, generates a certain kind of electromagnetic energy, vibrations, sound, geometric patterns, and everything else. We're talking about our nature, our structure, and so forth. Now, we're going to get to the Sankofa Wodin. We have an understanding of sound being primordial, sound coming from Amen, Amenet, sound being a collection of sound vibrations emanating from us, unique unto us, and as they emanate from our unique forms, that set of forms generates our name. So let's get into, and now you're beginning to see why the name is actually critical because it actually defines you. It is a revelation. That unique collection of sound vibrations is a revelation of the structure, the of your spirit. In fact, the infrastructure of your spirit. So let's go further with that. And you also begin to see why if you take on another set of sound vibrations that you attempt to ingest and utilize, then that creates a disruption in your infrastructure. Okay, so let's get into the Sankofa Wodin, and then it'll begin to give you more clarification. First, however, before we get into that, we'll talk about the divinities. We showed a couple of pictures when we sent out the event notification, and here on the channel, on this particular episode, you see images. You see images of a weighing of the heart seen from from two different chef-du or papyri. One is from the chef-du of Ani, the papyrus of Ani, Runu Pert Emeru, so-called Book of the Coming Forth by Day, misnomer Book of the Dead, the papyrus of Ani. Then we have another one from the papyrus of the chef-du of Anhai, which is a female individual who made her transition, and her papyrus, her chef-du. We have that one because it's key. One of them has the divinities Renenet and Renenet standing side by side. Then on the papyrus of Anhai, Anhai is Anhai. So you can, if you Google papyrus of Anhai, Anhai, you'll find images of her papyrus all over the internet, very popular. You can find transliterations as well. A key in this papyrus, the reason why we showed this one is because not only do you find like the divinity Shai on this papyrus, but you also find Reen, which is a male divinity, Renet, R-E-N-E-N, so the male aspect, and you have Renenet in the papyrus of Ani, and she's standing next to Meskenet. So, first, let's talk about the term reen. In ancient Kemet, the term for a name is spelled with the hieroglyph or the medut, which is the open mouth symbol for the letter R, and then the wavy line symbol, which is an electromagnetic wave, also used as a water sign, but an electromagnetic wave for the letter N. R and N. Now, very often they will stick an E in between the R and N to facilitate pronunciation, because very often the way it's written, typically there's no vowel written in between, or there's no medut representing a vowel sound in between, so it's just R and N, and whites and offspring don't know how to vocalize that. There's one dialectical vocalization in Coptic with an A, so it could be ran, but how is the term RN pronounced? Is it Ron? Is it Rune? Is it Rain? Is it Reen? What is it? In Akan culture, the term for name is deen. In ancient Kemet, it's reen. RN, the R is rolled. So when you roll the R, the tongue taps the roof of the mouth once. Reen. Reen in Kemet is deen in Akan. It is the same name, the same term. We have the proper vocalization, one of the proper vocalizations for the term. So we continue, just like we talked about the other night. The term, for example, in Akan for skin or flesh is enam. The term for skin or flesh in ancient Kemet is enam. The term for mouth in Akan is aro. The term for mouth in ancient Kemet is aro. So we have, of course, thousands of terms because it's the same language. Reen in ancient Kemet is deen or edin in Akan, meaning name. It's spelled with the first symbol, the symbol of the open mouth, which is the symbol of the letter R. We talked about the reason why that when you open your mouth to say Ra, it takes the form that medut is shown in, the symbol of the open mouth. But more importantly, when you make your mouth take that form and you say Ra, the life force energy in the breath, leaving your lungs, going through the trachea, and leaving your mouth, the air has to take that form, since that's the form that your mouth is taking. That means the life force energy must take that form as well. when you're saying ra. And therefore, the symbol that we use to represent the ra sound is the same shape that the life force energy must take when you pronounce that sound. So it's directly related. So the first ra sound is that symbol, the open mouth. The N sound is the second part of the term, second medu for the word for name, and it's the electromagnetic vibration. Of course, when you say n, the life force energy goes up through the nasal cavity and through the mouth, and nasal cavity through the mouth, and it's going up, down in order to make that sound. If you said n, and then you close your nose, then that sound is cut off. If you say n and you close your mouth totally, then the sound is cut off. You have to have the mouth open, but then you also have to have the nasal cavity open where the air is circulating through the nasal cavity and the mouth up and down, up and down, up and down as you're making that n sound. Therefore, you have the up, down, up, down, up, down, wavy line, electromagnetic wave, because that's the energy that's given off when you say that, that represents the letter N. And, of course, the letter N in English is just a truncated version of that wavy line. You just have two of them, one up, one down, and then another one up, and then that's the letter N. In ancient Kemet, you had like 7 of them, but they just truncated that. That's the letter N, and it has the same sound in English because that's where it comes from. So those two symbols, the expansive rolling energy, the R sound, and then the N sound. So you have the expansive energy coming out, rolling out, and then it's that vibratory frequency. That represents the deen, the reen, the name. All right, so then you have the name of the divinity. Her name is Renenet. Then you have the name of the deity, Renenet. Let's look at, in the Akan language, for that term, reen or deen. First, we're going to look in the Medutu for the hieroglyphics, the way it's defined in general. Reen meaning name. Of course, you look at a hieroglyphic dictionary, that's what it will say. Reen also has the name of that divinity, that goddess, as well as that deity, the god. Renen, Renenit. But reen also means to rear. They'll show an image of a female holding a child, nursing a child. To nurse, they'll say to nurse, to dandle. So they're holding the child, but then nursing the child, it also means to rear. Then renew, a baby or a child or a nursling. A babe, a male child or a female child, reneat, male child, renew, one that's still developing, one that's being nursed, one that's being fed. And so that's what they're giving the definition for. So the basic term is reen, meaning name. Then the name of the divinity, Renet or Renenet, female, Renen, male, and then a related term, reen, Renen, to nurse, to dandle, to hold, to nurse, to feed, and so forth. Now, let's look in the Akan language. What's the term deen? What does it mean? We're looking here. So that was just from the average, hieroglyphic dictionary from Fudge. Anybody can get that, download that. Now let's see what the Akan general definition is and how it's related to what we're talking about. So you have deen, which means name, of course, in Akan culture. The root of ding, and the N is nasal. The root is ding. And what does ding mean? It means to eat, to taste food. It also means to employ. It means to feed, to live upon, to employ, to spend, to use something or employ something, take the value of something, to taste and keep use for oneself, to use freely, to use naturally, to receive, to get, to accept, to inherit. So why does this term, the root of the term for name, mean that which you inherit, to feed, that which you consume, that which you take and that you use and employ? Why does it all mean that? We just talked about the specific collection of vibrations that are written into you by the divinity. When you receive those, we said we receive sound, we process sound, we emit sound, we transmit sound. We receive this collection of vibrations. We have a specific function to execute in creation that's encoded within our Okra. Because we have a specific function, we are given a specific form, and the life force energy that's fused into us goes through our specific, unique form. There's a generation of sound vibrations that's unique unto us. Those sound vibrations, that energy that's unique to us, is what feeds us. That collection of sound vibrations is what stimulates us, what feeds us, what gives us life, that keeps us going, and so forth. Deen, meaning to eat, to feed, to live upon, to employ, to use, to consume, to inherit. We've inherited a collection of vibrations. So this is why deen means name. It's something that we receive. And in fact, when you look at the way it's spelled in ancient Kemet, with the r sound, the open mouth, is the first part. Of course, the open mouth is what you use to feed, what you use to take in, what you consume, what you inherit. When you're talking about nursing, you're receiving that which is going to strengthen you, nourish you, give you that immunity. When somebody's breastfeeding, giving you that immunity that you're going to have for the rest of your life. Breastfed children have a stronger immunity throughout life than non-breastfed children and so forth. So you're receiving the nourishment you need that's natural, that's inherited, coming directly from your blood circle. All of these things are tied up into the way that word is spelled, intimate due to what it means and how it's connected to our function in creation. This is why you have the deities, Reen, Renenit, and Renenet, at the birth of the person, as well as in the weighing of the heart symbol when they're about to be birthed into the ancestral realm. But at the birth of the person, in ancient Kemet, you'll see the women sitting on birthing bricks in order to give birth to a child. One of those birthing bricks will be in the form of the female Abosom mescanet. It'll be a birthing brick, and then her head is sticking out. And then you'll also see sometimes the goddess mescanet just standing there. But in the papyrus of On High, you'll find one of those birthing bricks is called Renenet, the male divinity of the name, and then you also have Shai, which is talking about an aspect of our divine function dealing with the energy that you're given to execute in the world. So your quote-unquote destiny or quote-unquote fortune is associated with your name. The manner in which you execute your function in the world must carry a certain configuration of energy, and your name represents that. So let's get into the Sankofa Wodin, and then you'll see how it's all brought together and the importance of it. We want to deal with the linguistics first, so you can see that there's a cosmological basis for it. Now we're going to get into the practical application of it. Before we go there, I just want to make sure. Okay, hold on one second. Just scrolling up real quick. Okay, somebody asked a question about how did you get your name. This article right here, we're going to get into detail about that. Okay, a couple of those questions they'll be answered through this document we're getting into next. Okay, somebody asked quickly if the people of ancient Kemet called themselves gods and goddesses before European influence. Was this term used differently by them? So, no, we've never called ourselves gods and goddesses. That's never been accurate. It's only been recently when the whites and their offspring invaded our culture. They know that they're inferior. They've been trying to brainwash us with fake religion for thousands of years. It's taken them thousands of years to get to the point where they finally corrupted the religion to the point. They started this back over 2,300 years ago trying to corrupt the ancestral religion. It's only been over the past couple of hundred years that black people have started to embrace Christianity. If you think about West Afuraitkaitnut, most of those nations did not fall to the Europeans until the late 1800s, 1880, and on. The Europeans were there in the 1400s, 1500s, and so forth, but they did not fall to the Europeans until the late 1800s, after the enslavement process had already ended. So those nations were free. They didn't start hitting them with those missionaries until the 1800s. And the missionaries didn't really start making inroads until the early 1900s and then into the 1920s and so forth. So up until very recently, most of our people had nothing to do with Christianity. Prior to that, of course, the Muslim invasions, Negroes who were connected with Arabs, slaves to Arabs, waging war against our people. Some of those Negroes got involved in Islam. Some of our people got involved in it. Some of our people did not. So prior to the past couple of 100 years with the introduction of Christianity, you have a few hundred years where some people got involved in Islam and some people didn't. Most people didn't, but then you had some who did. But the vast majority of our people did not. So, but still, that's rather recent. Whites and offspring have been trying to corrupt the religion since the Greeks, Romans, heavily began to push the corruption of our tradition. It's taken them a couple of thousand years to finally get us on that nonsense. But when they got there, they wanted to corrupt the religion. They knew we wouldn't listen to anything outside of the divinities, the forces in nature, so they started trying to paint themselves as divinities. They knew they were inferior. They wished that they could be superior, so they wanted to call themselves gods. So they started making white statues, Greek statues, Roman statues, trying to make themselves deities because they wanted to be worshipped. They wanted us to worship them. They're waging war against our people. We typically would crush them. For thousands of years we did that. It was only near the end that they began to gain a foothold because of fracturing within our own society and people separating and so forth. So they wanted to be called divinity. They wanted to be the God. They had a quote-unquote God complex because they were inferior, and they hate the fact that they're inferior. So they want to start making themselves into God so we can worship them. So if we worship them, we won't seek to kill them, exterminate them, which we should be doing, which we should have been doing in ancient Kemet, of course, which we were doing for thousands of years. But they realized that if they could corrupt the religion and make our people want, them to stay, after they invaded our country, they had to corrupt the religion in order to make us believe that, well, God put them in the place and the goddesses God put them in this position to rule over us. So if we could believe that, then we wouldn't wage war against them to expel them from our country. They figured that out after thousands of years of invading our societies, typically losing, every now and then winning a war in the northern region. But even though they won the war, they were always looking over their shoulder because they knew that we would always regroup and come back and expel them from the country. So because that kept happening, they were like the only way that these people, these Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut people, will allow us to invade and continue to rule is if they believe that the deities ordained us to come in here. And if they believe that, then they won't fight against us because then they'll be fighting against the will of the deities, and they wouldn't want to do that. So they began to try to corrupt the religion. This is where Hellenization of ancient Kemet, then the Roman invasions, of course, then Islam, Christianity, Judaism, Hebrewism, all of this nonsense. And then in the East with Hinduism and everything else, Buddhism, Taoism, it's the same thing. Hermeticism, Gnosticism, all that, Kabbalism, all of that is nonsense. Attempts to corrupt various aspects of our culture to make us believe that the whites and their offspring had a divine right to be doing what they're doing. Our people typically did not go for that, and it took them thousands of years before they could finally, very recently, get us on that page. It's they who wanted to be the deities because they knew they were inferior. After they got us to the point where we believed that we were inferior after enslavement, now we're in the same position that they were. We're believing that we're inferior, even though we're not. They really are, but they knew that and they were angry about it. We've been conditioned to believe during enslavement and afterwards that we're inferior, and now that we want to make ourselves feel good about something, we get a false concept of what a deity is from the whites and their offspring, and then we want to identify ourselves with the god or the goddess and start walking around calling ourselves gods and goddesses. You won't find that anywhere in ancient Kemet. And this is what we talked about in the beginning, purification, talking about investigation. Simply read any text you want to read from ancient Kemet, dealing with the nature of the people and their relationship to the to any text. You will find that we were not walking around calling ourselves deities. It's not accurate. Sure, a king or queen mother would identify themselves with the divinity that governs their head, just like we do that in tradition today. A Akan person is a child of Nana Awusi. We're named after the divinity because we know that deity governs our head. And person who's Yoruba, if they're a child of Obatala, Oshun, then they'll get, maybe they'll be Oshun, Femi, something like that, Ogun Bumi, because they're connected to Ogun, but they know that they're not Ogun. They know that force in nature that's making that planet spin, they're not that deity. They know that they're a human being, and we know that we're human beings, that there's a value in being human beings, and we have our own function, our nkra and nkrabea, our specific function to execute. We know that. And the Abosom, the Orisha, the Vodou, they have their own function as divinity. The Supreme Being has given them a function to execute in creation. The Supreme Being has given us a function as human beings, Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut only, of course, to execute in creation as well. There are Negroes who worship the whites and their offspring and hate themselves, who want to latch on to pseudo-esotericism, and they've woven that nonsense into traditional practice, and they'll throw anything and call it ancient Kemetic, which it is not. But as soon as you investigate, you'll find that all of these Negroes who've been saying that we're gods and goddesses have no idea what they're talking about. They're simply reading the nonsense of white pseudo-New Age spirituality. You go to any white New Age bookstore, you'll find that nonsense published everywhere. The whites and their offspring were not holding our traditional culture, secretly in the occult until it was time for us to come and get it. They have no access to anything spiritual, anything deep, anything rooted. The deities have never communicated with them and never will. Just like your immune system kills cancerous cells, it doesn't communicate with them, and it isolates them and destroys them. The forces in nature repel the whites and their offspring. They do not communicate with them. They never have, and they never will. So there's no culture that the whites and their offspring are holding in occult or in secret, waiting for us to come, extract it. That's nonsense as well. That's for those individuals who teach that are people who still worship deep down inside the whites and their offspring and do not want to let them go. So they try to give them some position that would allow them to continue to interface with them. So that's pure nonsense. So when you look at the actual culture, you'll find, and we actually define properly, where does the term God come from? Where does the term goddess come from? You have a lot of Negroes running around talking about the origin of the term God, but if you investigate what they say, and we've done a thorough investigation to show the actual etymology, tracing it back through Proto-Indo-European, the Proto-Indo-European positive language phylum all the way back to ancient Kemet, and the terms in the cosmology of Kemet and how they were birthed. We give that information in our Anidaho book, which these Negroes have not done. So they've looked at a little etymology coming from Europeans. They repeated it. They had no basis or understanding where it came from, and then they run with some pseudo definition, some pseudo metaphysical definition, which is totally nonsensical. So when you do the actual research, which is very simple, you can overturn all that nonsense. But like we said at the beginning of the show, most people don't investigate. They hear what some people say, they embrace it, and they run with it. So if you look at, and we'll type this in right here, Anidaho, and it's it's one of our free books as well, Anidaho, Awareness. Go to the Nhoma page. You can download the free book. We also sell the soft cover version as well. That one is, I believe that one is $9 as well, soft cover. You'll get all the details there, and then you can investigate from those sources as well. And we prove that in detail. All right. So, and we also have a broadcast where we investigate that information as well. So look in the broadcast archives, and you'll find that as well. It's a section where we talk about the origin of the term God and black and Moor and nigger and all of that. We go into detail about that in the book. And then we did a broadcast, a 2-part broadcast, where we go into detail about those things as well. All right. Okay, just want to scroll through right quick, and let's see. It looks like some of the questions that I see here. I I just want to make sure that some of these questions will, okay, yeah, all of them, as we go through, when you go through this next document, you'll see that we basically answer those questions in this document. So look at the Sankofa Wodin article. Let me post that one more time for the people who just came in. I know it may have been pushed up. Okay, there it is right there. Let me take one quick call, and then we'll get to that document. Okay, Michiawo, number 3139, you had a question or a comment?
I do, real quick. When you were talking about, how we have been infected from religions and from everything, right? So is it safe to say that it's the same way with marriage? I'm finding that, our husbands had, 2 and 3 wives. So, I mean, is it safe to say that, that they have also infected us when it comes to marriage as well?
Right. So what aspect of it do you mean? And definitely, the way we approach marriage and everything else, we're approaching it typically through Christian and sometimes Muslim, a Christian or Muslim lens. But what aspect of it did you feel like was infected?
Just the mentality of us with the husband and just the wife, and us as a people not being able to even grasp, bringing in another wife or other children into the home is what I'm getting at too. I mean, even the sisters can't even come together. With no type of unity with us at all. So I was just just bringing that out. I just wanted to. I mean, I've and then like the past 2 weeks, it just hit me like a ton of bricks, like the God and Goddess labels, and when I have people to. Even now, when they inbox me stuff like that, it bothers me, and I was wondering why. So I started doing a little bit more research on it, and I'm like, wow, yeah. So we don't call ourselves that. Why? We should be comfortable where we are. But yeah, I just thought that bring out the point of the marriage point too.
No, I appreciate it. Yes, and in fact, we did on the Ma'al Keru page on our website, we did a webcast on Awadie or marriage, talking about polygamy and polygyny and so forth, and polyandry. We went into detail about that, but of course, people on one hand, we've been taught that polygamy is wrong. On the other hand, people, once they find out that's part of the culture, then you have a bunch of Negroes trying to quote unquote join the culture, so they can just get a bunch of young women. So,
right.
But then if you bring up the 2 forms of polygamy, which is polygyny and polyandry, there's polygyny is more than one wife, polyandry is more than one husband. Both forms have been practiced by different Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut people. Then all of a sudden the Negroes start backing up off of that, because then they're like, well, no, we can't have polyandry. So then you start to expose the Negroes who are really doing what they were doing for other reasons. So once people have a full understanding of what Awadie marriage is and how you don't have to be pulled into something you don't need to be. Some people that might be an option for them that they want to engage in, but other people that may not be part of their nkrabea, their function, their quote-unquote destiny, so they don't need to engage in it. If somebody's trying to force them into it, saying you're not cultural unless you do it, then that's a Negro just trying to, force you into something for lustful purposes. So we go into that. It's on the... In fact, somebody just posted that link, may I say. It's the 9th Ma'al Keru webcast on our Ma'al Keru page on the website.
Okay, I got it. Okay, my website.
Okay, may I say.
What I say.
Okay, and then, like I said, this piece dealing with the origin of the term God, as well as the origin of the term Negus, the origin of the term Naga, the origin of the term Negro, necro, nigger, naga, all of that. Of course, nigger and negus and all of that does not mean God at all. So we give the actual origin of these terms etymologically and cosmologically and trace them back to where did they come from in ancient Kemet. And this nonsense that most of these pseudo-metaphysical individuals have been promoting is totally inaccurate. So, for example, somebody like Booker Coleman, Kaba, Kamini, going around talking about the origin of the term nigger. He has a couple of videos out talking about that. Everything he says in that video is totally inaccurate. What he says about negus, totally false. What he said about naga in relation to nigger, totally false. What he says about ungar and so forth, totally inaccurate. And it's easily disproven. And the origin of the term God, totally inaccurate. So a lot of people have heard that, and other people, based on that or listening to Alim Bey and other people, totally false. So we give the actual etymology. It's very simple. You can go and trace those etymologies, but then we also go further than the Proto-Indo-European roots, and we show where those terms originated from in ancient Kemet. So they're not different terms from around the world, all pointing to nigger meaning God. Naga, negus, nganga, which is the actual term ganga or nganga, but it's really gan, a doubling of the term gan. All those terms you can find in the language of ancient Kemet, and we show where those terms come from, and also the root of the term Negro, which became necro and Negro, and Negro and necro became Negra in English, Nigra, the way they pronounce it in the South, and Nigra became nigger, and then we pronounce it nigger without the R. Going back to Negro and necro, meaning dead, but the root of that is nek and nekku, which means lack or want or negative or suffering, and nek and nekku in Proto-Indo-European languages, you'll find that same root thousands of years earlier in ancient Kemet, nek, nekku, meaning foes or enemies who are crushed and beaten to death. So it's always been a derogatory term from the beginning. So we go into detail about all that, and we show the cosmology that actually births the term. Where did the terms come from in the cosmology of the culture? Same thing we did with more means dead, giving the actual etymological origin, but then the cosmology, where did they come from, the functioning of deities and the relationship of the deities to the people, where did these terms come from? Why does more mean dead? What is it referencing? What forces in nature does it reference having to do with death? So we prove that, which a lot of these Negroes have been running around misinforming our people, especially Christians, Muslims, Hebrews, other people who are taking misinformation and trying to use it against ancestral culture, as well as misinformed individuals who claim to be involved in, cultural or conscious information and are propagating pure nonsense and falsehood. So all we have to do is investigate. Don't just listen to people, no matter what their so-called credentials are. Investigate, and their nonsense will crumble instantly. Okay, so now let's get to the Sankopa Wodin. This is the article. So we start off talking about the Akan term for name is deen, which we talked about. We say the deen, the name, is analogous to water in Afuraitkaitnut with respect to its value, to our well-being, our proper development, and proper functioning within creation. As an Afuraitkaitnut individual, you are a created entity in creation. In order to live and to function properly, your physical body is absolutely dependent on water, yet you need more than just water to live. In the same fashion, as a created entity, your sunsum, your spirit, must have a properly given or received deen, a name, reen, in order to be properly distinguished from other sunsum or other spirits, to live and to execute your nkrabea, your nkra, your divine function, given to you by Inyame wa Inyame, Amenet Amen, to execute in creation. Yet your sunsum, your spirit, requires more than a properly given and received deen or reen or name in order to function harmoniously in life. It is critical that we understand the totality of this truth. Your body absolutely needs the replenishing properties of water. Yet water is not all that your body needs. Your sunsum absolutely needs the replenishing energy of a proper, true deen, or reen. Yet a proper, true deen is not all that your sunsum, your spirit, needs. Both aspects of this truth are equally important. So then we go into detail about, like we just spoke about, the deen manifests as a collection of sound vibrations. They carry energy. Energy affects our consciousness, thoughts, ideas, behavior, and physiological processes. In order to execute your nkrabea, your divine function, your life's mission, your life focus, your sunsum must constantly and consistently receive and transmit energy vibrations that are in harmony with your nkra, with your soul, your divine consciousness, as opposed to constantly and consistently receiving and transmitting energy vibrations that are in disharmony with your Okra, your soul, your divine consciousness. This is similar to ensuring that you accept clean water into your body consistently, as opposed to accepting contaminated water into your body consistently. So we're talking about ingesting sound vibrations. Those vibrations stimulate your body, but stimulate your spirit body, affect thoughts, consciousness, intentions, actions, ideas, formulations, and so forth, and behavior. When you pull in a corrupt set of vibrations, then you're ingesting discordant energy that will affect you in a negative fashion. If you accept harmonious vibration, which receiving or hearing somebody speak your properly given deen or name, and then you receive that, process it, and transmit that energy, then it's a harmonious set of vibrations. It stimulates your thoughts properly and eventually affects your behavior. So it's the same as taking in clean water consistently as opposed to taking in polluted water consistently. How is your body going to operate off of taking in polluted water on a regular basis? Poison food on a regular basis, polluted air on a regular basis, a polluted set of vibrations on a regular basis. We have experienced how sound vibrations affect the world around us physically. One can sing at such a volume and pitch that the vibrations emanating from the individual will break a glass. If the sound vibrations have the capacity to break a hard substance such as a glass, what are those sound vibrations doing to the singers and listeners' internal organs, cells, brain cells? What effect does the energy of differing sound wave groupings, configurations, have on the physiology, thought processes, the consciousness of our people? A properly harmoniously structured set of sound vibrations stimulates your body and your spirit in a harmonious fashion. A perverse, discordant collection of sound vibrations creates a negative set of thoughts, intentions, and eventually behaviors within our people. The various wavelengths and rates of vibrations which constitute the different created sounds manifest in nature are categorized within nature under the governance of different Abosom, deities, Ntoru, so-called Netoru, Netetu, and so forth. We bold this section. All created entities are affected by the various sound wave groupings manifest in nature according to our particular connection to the Abosom. We say created entities, meaning Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut people, particularly, not the whites and their offspring. Your particular connection to the Abosom is unique. It is determined by the specific ancestral blood circle of which you are a component incarnate part. So you're not just a spirit, a sunsum, like all sunsum or all spirits are all the same. That's not true. Not only are you not, spirits are different, but then you're a spirit that is sent to a specific blood circle, so that further gives definition and nuance to who you are. So encoded within the Amaniye or cultural traditions of Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut, people are all possible or potential conscious and energetic effects that each and every possible configuration of sound waves can have on our bodies and our sunsum, our spirits, individually as well as collectively as an Abusiakuo, an ancestral family clan. From the highest tones to the lowest, from the most simple tones to the most complex sound wave configurations, all have specific measurable effects on our bodies down to the subatomic level and on our sunsum, our spirits, including our life force energy, and are governed by different Abosom and specific non-anoman samanfo. So every sound has a different vibration. The lower sounds, the higher sounds, and so forth. Those sounds affect our organs and our spiritual organs in a specific manner, a measurable manner. We have encoded that and categorized that in our culture. The combinations of different sounds affect us differently. We've categorized the combination, all the possibilities. This is what our divinatory practices encompass. That's part of what they encompass. The collections of energy vibrations in creation, the various Abosom, where they fit in creation, how they can affect us, how their energy can affect us, how the various sound vibrations from different divinities, as well as ancestral spirits, discarnate spirits, can affect us spiritually and physically. All of that has been laid out. We've codified that in our divinatory practices, and then it's written into our cultural practices. So the next piece is Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut. We thus recognize the reality that the vibrational tumi, meaning the divine power in Akan, divine power tumi, like Ashe in the Yoruba, tumi in Akan, tumi, vibrational tumi or power of the deen, the reen, is actually a formula. Your name is a formula, a sound wave, vibrational, energetic formula that once heard or spoken will influence the individual's sunsum to either align itself with his or her Okra soul, and thus his or her nkra and nkrabea, his divine function, her divine function, or disalign itself from his or her Okraa, and nkra and nkrabea. This formula is the one set of vibrations that the individual will speak and hear, transmit and receive more than any other set of vibration in his or her life. For people's deen or names are used from the day they receive them until the day they transition from this world, and then after transition through the onset of life in Asamando, the ancestral world. So your name is a specific configuration of vibrations. It is a formula, if it's properly given and received, that when you hear it, when someone speaks it, when you hear it, when you think about it, that set of vibrations as a formula will either affect your sunsum in a way where it force an alignment of your sunsum, your spirit, with your divine consciousness, with your Okraa, which is the deity that dwells in your head region, or if it's a set of discordant vibrations because it's not properly given and received, then it'll disalign you every time you hear it. Just like you can hear a melodious sound from some musical instruments, or if somebody takes some chalk and scratches it across a board and it makes somebody cringe, that shrill sound that makes you have a reaction that disaligns you momentarily, you can feel that. Your spirit can feel a discordant collection of vibrations that have nothing to do with the collection of vibrations that are actually emanating from your body and spirit at every moment. If you keep ingesting a set of vibrations that are out of harmony with that, then you are swallowing a set of vibrations that create disalignment, disharmony, discordance within your spirit, and you're constantly unstable. Okay, so there are subtle and overt effects that collections of sound waves have on the physiology of the individual, the life force energy, the spirit body of the individual, the ancestral memory, and the consciousness of the individual. The deen, or reen, thus births and or reinforces ideas which ultimately manifest through and as individual behavior. The behavior and individuals engage in, is a major determinant of the quality of life for the individual, the family, and the Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut nation of which they are a component part. The quality of life for our people is defined by the proximity of the individual's thoughts, intentions, and actions to his or her nkra and nkrabea, their divine function. If your thoughts, intentions, and actions promote alignment with your function, your nkra, your nkrabea, what you came in the world to do, then the quality of life is properly defined as good or harmonious. If your thoughts, intentions, and actions promote disalignment from your nkra and nkrabea, the divine function you were given, then that quality of life is properly defined as bad or disharmonious. It is therefore imperative from an individual, family, and Afuraitkaitnut national perspective to make sure that the deen given to or taken by an individual is proper. It is imperative that their deen, their name, is a collection of sound vibrations that when heard or spoken will instantaneously influence the sunsum, the spirit of the individual, to harmonize with nyamewa, nyame, and divine order through aligning itself with his or her Okra, the soul, the divine consciousness, and their divine function. This promotes harmony within the individual, the Abosom, and the Afuraitkaitnut, or mind or nation. The giving of or taking on of a proper deen or name for Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut is therefore a matter of individual, family, and national security, physical and spiritual. This reality is the foundation upon which the ritual naming practices of Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut are laid. So then we go into the etymology of the name deen, or reen, deen in Akan, reen in ancient Kemet, showing it's the exact same word. And as you see, when we talk about ingesting a collection of sound vibrations, a collection of energy, of forces, so it's like if you swallow some food. Remember, the root of deen is deen, which is to eat, to consume, to take in, inherit, to employ. So when you take in food, you inherit it, you consume it, then you employ the energy that you've been given. That's the root of the term reen, de, to take in, to employ, to inherit, to consume. So when you're taking in a set of sound vibrations, just like you're taking in food, when you take in the food that is disharmonious with you, then you'll create disharmony in your body and disharmony in your behavior, and then your behavior affects other people in a disharmonious fashion. That affects the national security of our people. You take in harmonious vibrations that align you with your divine function, then your thoughts, intentions, and actions will consistently and constantly be realigned with divine order. Then your behaviors will be a manifestation of that. When you follow that, then that promotes and propagates order within the community, and that strengthens the national security of our people. So your name is directly related to our national security as an Afuraitkaitnut people. Now, here's the next piece. The greatest significance of the deen is that it is an actual spiritual entity that takes up residence within the individual. This is shown in Kemet, where the nkra, or goddess, so-called Netert, and nkra, the god, so-called Neter, whom govern the reen, are Renenet and Renenet. In the pictorials, they are found in close proximity to the nkra of quote-unquote destiny called Shai. The nkra of destiny or fate is called Shait. We talk about Shai and Shait, or She and Shebia, in our book, the Okra complex. We go into detail about those two divinities. You have your Okra, your soul, your divine consciousness, the deity that dwells in your head region. That's the force in your head that you feel pulling you in one direction or the other, always pulling you towards thoughts, intentions, and actions that are in harmony with divine order, in harmony with nyamewa, nyame. Your goal in life is to align your thoughts, intentions, and actions on a moment-to-moment basis with that divine force in your head region. When you do that, then, of course, your behavior will be harmonious. You'll execute your function in the world harmoniously. You'll promote order and harmony with our people when you interact with our people. If you go against what the force in your head is pulling you towards, it's pulling you in one direction, you go in the other direction. Now there's disalignment. That's disorder. That's discordance that creates disorder within your spirit, disorder within your thoughts, intentions, your actions, disorder within your body, and eventually disorder in the community. No different than taking in food that's not in harmony with your cells, that creates disorder in the body, sickness, disease, and so forth. When you take in foods that are naturally harmonious and feed the body properly, then that promotes order and harmony within the body and not the violence of disease. The deen itself is a spiritual entity, a little force, a globe of energy, of power, a specific configuration of sound vibration that dwells within you, that dwells inside of you. It has its own electromagnetic field, its own orbit. If you take in a collection of sound vibrations that are discordant, that are disharmonious, that little globe of perverse energy dwelling within you has its own orbit, its own electromagnetic field, just like a planet, just like a magnet has its own electromagnetic field. When you have a sphere of energy with its own electromagnetic field or orbit that's disharmonious, then that field will pull you and draw you and influence your desire to engage in self-destructive activity, perverse thoughts, disharmonious intentions, disharmonious action. When you have a properly given and received deen or name based on the energy that's constantly coming from you, that set of vibrations that's generated as a spiritual force within you, it has its own orbit, and it pulls you towards thoughts, intentions, and actions that are in harmony with your function in creation. So when you ingest that orb, that sphere of perverse vibrations like Johnson or Jackson, forget about the way it's spelled. Johnson, Jackson, Williamson, those set of vibrations are discordant and perverse. And you're trying to feed off of that sphere of energy, and you absorb it, you ingest it, D, to eat, to consume, to absorb, D, to employ. And then you employ a set of perverse vibrations, and you have a perverse outcome. Your thoughts are distorted, your beliefs are distorted, your intentions are distorted. You're not trying to live in harmony with divine order and execute your function in the world. You're engaged in self-destructive activity and then foolish rationalizations about why you're engaged in self-destructive activity. When you imbibe or you ingest a sphere of energy, that's a reflection of the energy that emanates from you. So whenever you hear your name, if it's Afua or Oshumbemi or whatever your name is, and it's a set of vibrations that is harmonious, that set of vibrations, when you ingest it, D, when you ingest it, when you consume it, D, and you begin to employ it, D, and because you have inherited it, D, then that set of vibrations will get inside your system, and the magnetism from that sphere of energy will pull you in harmony with your cry, and your thoughts, intentions, and actions will follow that. It's not the only thing, but it's a key component part. Just like water is not the only thing you need, but if you don't have any water, you just say, I'm just going to eat food. I don't like drinking water. Water is nasty. It doesn't matter how much food you eat and how good the food is. If you don't drink water, you become dehydrated, and eventually you will die. So you need water. Your body is dependent on water. It's also dependent on fuel as well. So you need the deen. You need the name. It's just like water. Of course, you have the open mouth symbol for the R sound, and then the wavy line symbol, electromagnetic wave, but then also that's a water sign as well. So it's like water. You need that to survive, but then you also need, that divine living energy coming from the Ba and the Ba'et for fuel as well. So you need both. It's not one or the other, you need both. Just like it's not one or the other with water and food, you need both. All right. So, so we just went through that piece that was on page 2. This is why we say in the symbolism of Knesset, Nubian, and Kamit, as well as the culture of the Akan, the reen, deen is directly tied to your nkrabea, your divine function in the world. The shai, shayet, we call she and shebia and Akan. And ancient Kamit is shai, shayet, is she, shebia, and Akan. This is true of Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut culture universally. All Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut cultures have this information encoded within the culture. Of course, they have their own names for it based on their language, but everybody is doing the same thing. So if you study this, you find out that you're Yoruba, all you do is find out what do the Yoruba call these concepts and principles, and you'll find it's the same thing. They just have different names for it, and the way they express it in their own colors, and, cultural expression is their own way, but the principles are the same. And that's just across the board. All right, so So when we say that, to say that anytime you study an Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut culture in detail from an authentic perspective, you're really studying and learning all of them. So even if you were studying the Akan tradition or studying this information, and then you find out that you're Yoruba or Ebe or something like that, when you start embracing your Ebe culture, you will already understand all the concepts that govern Ebe culture. You just will now begin to learn what do the Ebe call these things, and then you'll notice that the Ebe language resonates more with you than saying these things in the Akan language, even though you know it's the same thing, but because that's your ancestry, that's the language you spoke the last time you were on Earth. When you were in a previous incarnation, you used to speak Ebegbe and so forth. Then when you hear those sound vibrations in the dialect of the Ebe people, then that stimulates you on another level. But the principles are the same. So you'll learn it. Say you're studying this Akan information, you find out who you are, then you'll transfer and you'll find all the same concepts there, and it'll just deepen your understanding of Vodou. If you're Yoruba, it'll deepen your understanding of the Orisha tradition. If an Akan person didn't know they were Akan and they were studying the Yoruba tradition, they were learning about the Orisha and learning about the Egungun and so forth, they're learning about the deities, they're learning about the ancestral spirits, they're reading and learning. But when they finally get to Akan culture and find out that's who they are, they know that what was said about the Orisha is the same as the Abosom. It's just that the way it's expressed through their Akan ancestry will resonate with them on the deepest level. But they will have learned something about the culture foundationally from studying any Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut culture. But it's one thing to study a culture, but you can't join a culture that you're not part of. We are born into these traditions. Every Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut person, you have been here before. You lived as part of a culture before the enslavement process in the previous incarnation. You are that same spirit that has returned. Your blood may be mixed, but the soul is not. As we say in our Kwamu mind, well, tumi fra moja, and so on, tumi fra nkra. Okra, your blood may be mixed, but the soul cannot be mixed. So you're the same individual spirit that has returned. So when you finally get back connected with your ancestral culture, you'll know that's your home. If you're really Akan, you were an Akan spirit who lived as an Akan previously, you were enslaved in North America, you died fighting and killing the whites in our offspring like you should, you were an ancestral spirit for a couple hundred years, you return through your descendants in this recent time. Many people have been mixed, with different ethnic groups on the continent and in the plantations and on the plantations in the boats for hundreds of years. And in America, you may be born with a lighter brown skin because of all that blood mixture, but you're the same Akan spirit who fought crackers in a previous lifetime. Now you're back. It doesn't matter that the light brown skin, because of the mixture, has taken place. You're the same Akan spirit. So you may begin reading up on the Yoruba tradition and learning about the Orisha, and it'll resonate because you're talking about forces in nature. But as soon as you come across something talking about Akan and Nyamewa and Nyame and Abosom and Nsamanfo, bam, you'll be stimulated on the highest level because that's what you used to speak and that's your culture. You can't just join the Yoruba tradition because that's not your ancestry. The way your spirit is structured, it harmonizes with the dialect of the Akan, the way we express our relationship with the forces of nature as Abosom and so forth. That's where you're born into it. You incarnate it as an Akan, just like a Yoruba incarnates as a Yoruba, Ebe, and so forth. Every black person, no matter where we are in the world, we can find out what our group is directly from our Nsamanfo instantly. So we're not lost. Okay, so let's get back to this. So when we talk about water as a necessity, of course you need that to live, and we talked about the association with the deen. We talked about a proper deen is not all you need to live harmoniously, spiritually, yet without that set of vibrations, constantly realigning your sunsum with your Okra, your nkra, and nkrabea, your function in the creation is lifeless. We of course have experienced individuals who have taken on a proper deen, yet they are in no way examples of sublime power or good character. These individuals are akin to those individuals who realize that water is good for them, so they decide to drink water exclusively. Of course, a water-only diet will not be healthy in the long run. Indeed, a prolonged water-only diet will eventually lead to the self-inflicted death by starvation of the body. We have experienced other individuals who generally appear to exhibit sublime power, good character, yet have never taken on a proper deen or a proper name. They are akin to individuals who realize that water is good for them and water is a liquid, so they decide to consume other replacement liquids instead of consuming water. Of course, a diet which includes liquids yet excludes water will not be healthy in the long run. In fact, the body will ultimately suffer, for the cells will not be properly replenished. Such individuals are in the majority. Being that this is the state of the majority, we must look at the condition of the majority. So when we talk about good character, Suba and Pa, some people will say, well, you know, I'm going to practice traditional culture. I'm going to take on a proper name, and they'll take on a proper name. And you need more than just a name, just like you need more than just water. You go on a water-only diet, you got the name, but you're not getting the other fuel, starve to death. You have other people who, you know, they get proper food. They don't really like water too much, so they're like, well, I eat fruits and vegetables. I eat a lot of fruits, and fruits have water in them, and then I'll just consume some juice, and I'll consume some, you know, cola and ginger beer and things like that. I really don't like water. So they appear to be eating right and doing whatever, but in the long run, if you deny yourself of water, you deny yourself that replenishing capacity that water has, then you're not going to be healthy in the long run. Most people don't have a proper deen. The ones who appear to have good character and trying to do something, but they don't have a proper deen, again, most people don't have a proper name, so that's the majority condition. We say, being that this is the state of the majority, we must look at the condition of the majority. Let's look at the majority for a second. The people who appear to have good character, just like the people who appear to be eating right, but they refuse to drink water. People who appear to have good character, but they refuse to take on a proper deen. We're talking about the value and necessity of a proper deen, where some people say, well, it's not that important. Let's see how important it really is. By now, you know how important it is, because it's the sound vibrations that actually emanate from you at every moment. That unique collection is your deen, and if you're not ingesting that, you're trying to ingest a different set of vibrations into your spirit consistently and employ that, then you're swallowing discordant vibrations, which affects the way you think, act, and operate. But let's look at the majority. Number one, we are not sovereign. We're not talking about Moorish nonsense. We're talking about the normal sense of sovereignty. We are not sovereign. We are not secure in sovereignty. Our community is no closer to self-rule in the Western Hemisphere than we were 100 years ago. The beginning of sovereignty is self-sovereignty. Self-sovereignty is a manifestation of your reclamation of your identity. It is the beginning, not the ending, but the beginning. Beginning and ending are two halves of a whole. The tree term for independence is ahufadi. The term ahon means self. We talked about that yesterday. The term fa means to grasp. We talked about that yesterday. To be independent is to take hold or grasp. Fa, of yourself. Ahon. It is time for us to finally, truly engage the process of ahufadi, and of course, D means to consume, to employ, on the right foundation. Reclaiming your deen leads directly to the reclamation of your identity, your spiritual culture, accepting your nkrabea, your divine function, and rejecting, eradicating the achiwadifo, spirits of disorder, the whites and their offspring, their fake religions, and perverse culture for good. The restoration of our full sovereignty and security is then guaranteed. We're talking about independence on our own land, self-rule, and being able to defend that self-rule. That's sovereignty. It is an act of subai boni, or bad character. Boni means bad or evil. In Akan, disorder. Boni means bad or evil in ancient Kemet. It's the same word. It is an act of subai, which means character. Subai boni, bad character, bad subai, wittingly or unwittingly. to neglect to receive and or neglect to utilize a proper deen, a proper name. Every time you speak and empower the names of the Achiwadyefo, the spirits of disorder, the whites and their offspring, you are projecting disordered energy on yourself and other Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut. Such an act is akin to an Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut individual who has tuberculosis, who may be the most sincere and helpful individual you have ever encountered. However, when they cough on you, they are afflicting you. They are contaminating you. They are actually assaulting your very life. Until they make the conscious decision to eradicate their infection, they are no different effectively than the kind of individual who moves to infect you with tuberculosis deliberately as an act of war against you and your family. There are some very sincere Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut who are smokers. Some have yet to learn, however, that secondhand smoke causes cancer to develop, not only in smokers but also in non-smokers. There are many of our people who have developed and died from lung cancer, yet have never smoked a day in their lives. They died because they lived with someone. It's about 8,000 people a year in our community die from secondhand smoke, lung cancer coming from secondhand smoke. There are many of our people who have developed and died from lung cancer, yet have never smoked a day in their lives. They died because they lived with someone who was a smoker. They were forced to breathe in the air that their so-called, quote-unquote, loved one was constantly contaminating. The actions of the, quote-unquote, loved one are effectively no different than an enemy of the family who would have plotted to poison and murder the same individual by creating cancer within them deliberately. Ultimately, the individual is dead because of poisoning. The projection of disordered vibrational frequencies via the use of non-Afurakani, non-Afuraitkaitnut names is a manifestation of Subain Bani, bad character, and an actual assault on Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut people. Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut using Achiwadifo, or the whites and their offsprings, spirits of disorders, order names, have become the agents of the Achiwadifo, the spirits of disorder, the whites and their offspring, continuously projecting dissonance in their own sunsum spirits and the sunsum spirits of any misguided Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut individual or group of individuals with whom they come into contact. Our spiritual, cultural, economic, and political stagnation is the result. So these are the direct effects of constantly ingesting a set of discordant vibrations and attempting to ingest them, process them, and employ them. We're constantly misinforming ourselves, creating disorder within ourselves that affects our thoughts, intentions, and actions, and our stagnation is the result. We have accepted and perpetuated a number of foolish rationalizations for allowing the Achiwadifo, the spirits of disorder, the whites and their offspring, to continue their hold over and on us through our name. In reality, these rationalizations were crafted and forced on us by the Achiwadifo themselves without many of us realizing it. Now, you'll have some people, they'll say, well, the deities and the ancestors told me I don't have to change my name. No deity, no Abosom, Orisha, ancestor, ancestress will never support you retaining the names of the whites and their offspring ever. If anybody tells you that the Orisha said, well, that's not that important right now, the Abosom said, well, you don't really have to do that because it's all about the way you act and your character, it's not about your name, they are lying to you. If a spirit communicates that to you, you know that it's not a divinity. If a spirit communicates that to you, that is not an honored or spiritually cultivated ancestor or ancestress. It's a corrupt, disordered, ignorant ancestor or ancestress who was not cultivated, or a criminal. But no force of divine order will ever direct you to not take on the name. That's impossible. They will always direct you to take on your proper name because your name is rooted in the divine living energy that's emanating from you on a consistent basis, generating a collection of vibrations that's unique to you, and you're constantly emitting that just by virtue of being alive. If you don't embrace that set of vibrations you're emitting and utilize it to identify yourself, then you're going against the deities themselves. So no divinity will tell you that. So if somebody gives you a reading that says, well, spiritually that's not important, then you know the person doesn't know what they're talking about. Again, credentials mean nothing. Initiations mean nothing. Lineage means nothing. Being from the continent means nothing. None of that means nothing at all. It's nonsense. If they're telling something false, then they don't know what the hell they're talking about. And you reject them outright and instantly and consistently, because a lot of these Negroes don't know what they're talking about, especially the ones on the continent who've been influenced by Islam over the past few hundred years and have woven that foolishness into the culture. Now they're walking around with Islamic names and cloaking that nonsense into the culture, doing pseudo-readings, pseudo-divinations with little dead spirits, calling them deities. They're walking around with names like Ishmael and Muhammad and all other kinds of ridiculous names, and you'll notice their rationalizations are a manifestation of that stupidity. Even though they may be charismatic and articulate, but they're constantly emanating ignorance and trying to cloak it under the guise of traditional culture. And then they spread that nonsense to the people and say, well, we're traditional. We've been doing this for hundreds of years. Surely we know what we're talking about. They don't. All right, so that's one rationalization. And we go into detail, of course, why that's inaccurate. And the Abosom don't support that. The Abosom are embodiments of divine order. As we said, it's impossible for them to support disorder. Just as they would never support child molestation, they will never support their children, us, spirit molestation, by sanctioning a set of ill-constituted vibrational frequencies, which is non-Afurakanu, non-Afuraitkaitnut names, which by default can only negatively influence us away from them, the Abosom, and our nkrabea. Recall that the deen is a spiritual entity. The non-Afurakanu, non-Afuraitkaitnut label or quote-unquote name is also a spiritual entity, a perverse spirit, a spirit of disorder. The Abosom have and only exercise cheat or divine hate for and towards all spirits of disorder. The Abosom have never and will never sanction disorder. That also includes the little spirit of disorder, which is an ill-constituted name or set of vibrations coming from the whites and their offspring, whether it's an Islamic name or a Christian name, a so-called Hebrew name, English name, Spanish, French, Hindu name, Arab, pseudo-Native American name, Asian name, all of that nonsense. Okay, just quickly, for those who are on the internet online, you have a minute to call in if you want to stay on past 11 o'clock, because the internet portion will cut off. You can listen on the phone past 11 o'clock. Just call in the number 657-383-0635, 657-383-0635. You have about 55 seconds to call in. If you don't call in within 55 seconds, then the show on the internet will cut off, and only the people on the phone line will be able to continue to hear. But you have 45 seconds now to call in. 657-383-0635. I just want to get through this particular section, then we're going to go to some of the callers that we have and the questions online. All right. Just a couple more things of some of these rationalizations, and then we'll get to these questions. But individuals who claim that the Abosom told them it was okay for them to retain these names, we talked about this is nonsense. They're lying, or they have been lied to. The case claim is false. Same thing with the so-called ancestral spirit. They will never direct you in that fashion. Of course, some people will go and get readings, and they'll say, well, you don't got to worry about a name right now. It's okay. We have English names. We've had English names all along, and if you don't have to worry about changing your name. You can keep your English name as long as you're practicing the culture. Now you know you're dealing with somebody who does not know what the hell they're talking about at all. When a so-called ancestor or ancestress We said it's not spiritually cultivated. If such a spirit tells you, it's okay, keep our name, keep our quote-unquote family name. Imagine a Negro talking about Williams is our family name, and you need to keep that in honor of your family. When the rapist named Williams raped that name into your family. And now they're saying don't let go of it because that was your grandfather's name. They're insane. So no ancestral spirit that's cultivated will tell you that. It's not one of the Nananoma and Samafo. It would only be a spiritually undeveloped deceased relative who would say such a thing. They gave bad advice when they were alive on earth and continue to give bad advice from the spirit realm. For example, those who taught you that the fictional character Jesus was real, or for example, that he was God's son. God's son is a white man. African religion is evil and unnecessary. Come out the sun before you get too black. Those kind of Negroes who are given that kind of bad advice, some of them, when they make their transition, they're still not spiritually developed. They're still controlled by lust, by vice, and so forth. Whatever feels good, do it, that kind of thing. So they they don't want you to get involved in none of that. Just come on and attend to me. Stop focusing on that ancestral religious stuff. Just when I come to you in a dream or I come to you, just make sure you put some food out for me or make sure you do this for me or do whatever. All they're concerned about is you attending to them because they're earthbound and they're suffering and they're full of anxiety and so forth, and they haven't made a smooth transition to the ancestral realm. They know if you focus on divine order, focus on your nkra, your soul, your divine consciousness, your nkrabea, and the Abosom, then you will repel them and they'll be forced to engage in their own spiritual growth and development, which they neglected when they were on earth. If you're focused on order, you will repel them. They don't want that. They want you to stay in a weak, spiritually degenerate state, misery loves company, so you all can feed off of each other in a, negatively interdependent relationship, codependent negative relationship. Just like they did when they were here, they would try to do the same thing there. So we don't, pour libation and evoke those kinds of discarnate ancestral spirits. We invoke the Nananom and Samafo, the spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors, and those good ancestresses and ancestors who were maybe not cultivated, but at least they were trying to do the right thing. Not the Negroes who were controlled by lust and vice and cared nothing about divine order. All right, so their guidance is always an absolute, for the Nananom and Samafo, spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors, their guidance is always in absolute harmony with the Abosom. If it were not, they would not be included in that category. So consistent attunement to Nyame is what distinguishes them as Nananom and Samafo. Those are the ones whose advice we follow. All right. So another rationalization, some Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut have foolishly stated that they have retained white names, labels, out of quote-unquote respect for their parents. This is absurd on more than one level. Fere, or respect, in Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut culture can only be rooted in nokwade, truth. You can't have respect that's not rooted in truth. That's insane. Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut, Africans, black people, we respect only nokwade, truth. We recognize or acknowledge falsehood, ignorance, disorder, only so that we can reject it, while we seek only to incorporate nokwade or truth into our lives. If your parents' teaching or advice is out of harmony with nokwade, truth, then reject your parents' teaching or advice outright. This is essentially Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut. Indeed, to accept the misguided, foolish, self-destructive advice from a misguided parent is against the very foundation of Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut culture. It is against Nanasom, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut ancestral religions. Our most ancient parents are Nyamewa, Nyame, Amenet, and Amen, and the Abosom. We follow their guidance as transmitted to us by the Nananom and Samafo, our spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors, as opposed to those in Samafo who were not Nananom, who were not cultivated. Those who are Nananom Mpanyifo, spiritually cultivated, or honorable elders and eldresses who presently live in the community, are those who uphold the divine guidance given by the Abosom and Nananom and Samamfo consistently, without fail or profanation. This is why we have that title, Nananom Mpanyinfo, as opposed to simply Mpanyinfo. So we talk about the difference between an Mpanyinfo, people who are older people, and Nananom Mpanyinfo, who are elders. There's a difference between someone who's older and an elder. This is why we have the term Kwasea Panyin in the tree language. Kwasea means stupid or foolish, or Panyin means older person. Kwasea Panyin is the stupid, foolish, older person. Why would we have a term in the language in our culture that designates a specific kind of older person as a stupid elder, a stupid elderess? Some Negroes who don't know about culture will say, well, in the African culture, they're always objectified as though they're not part of it. In the African culture, and they subconsciously, because they're not really part of it. They'll say, in the African culture, we respect our elders. Eldership is primary, and we don't go against our elders or whatever. I to say we go along with that because that's African. And your elder comes along and tells you it's okay to, hold on to the name Johnson because that was your father's name, or Jackson because that was your father's name, and you'll be disrespecting your father if you go against that name. And then the fool says, well, I can't go against my elders. That's African culture. Now you have a fool that has no concept of reality. Again, investigation. Many of our people have heard people say we can't go against the elders. That's not African. All you have to do is investigate. All right, well, let's look in the culture and see if that's true. Very simple. What is the term for elder in Akan? Opanyi, older person. What kind of opanyi do we have? Well, we have Nananom Mpanyinfo, which is plural for opanyi. Nananom, those who are nana, those who are spiritually cultivated and honorable, venerable Mpanyinfo. But then you have Kwasea Panyin. What does Kwasea mean? Stupid or foolish. You have a stupid or foolish elder. Those are the ones you do not follow. You do not follow their advice. You do not allow your children to follow their advice. You keep your children away from them. So in Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut culture, when you actually investigate, and you know this internally, but when you investigate, you'll find that it's part of the culture quite naturally. When you embrace real culture, authentic culture, there are wise elders and eldresses and stupid older people, and you do not follow them. Whether they're stupid deliberately, agents of the whites and their offspring, criminal, or they're ignorant unwittingly, but they're just following along with ignorance because that's what they learned. Either way, the advice is the same, it's perverse, and you don't follow it. The only guidance you follow is those who have demonstrated they can align their thoughts, intentions, and actions with divine order on a consistent basis. That's what defines them as Nananom Mpanyinfo, spiritually cultivated elders and eldresses. And it is only that class of Mpanyinfo who have been endowed with the responsibility and the capacity to assist us in our development by Nyame wa Nyame. Once they crystallize into that function, then they receive the added power to me, spiritual power from Nyame wa Nyame, Amenet and Amen, and the responsibility to utilize that power to assist us in our development. Only them, only that class, the Nananom Mpanyinfo. The other Nananom Nsamafo in the spirit realm and Mpanyinfo in the physical realm. The other Nsamafo in the spirit realm and the Mpanyinfo, the elders, elderesses, whether they're just nice elders and elderesses who are not necessarily cultivated, but they're just nice people, but they're still misguided, or the other class, which is more grave, the Kwasea Panyin, the stupid or foolish older person. Those classes, they don't give you that kind of advice. They don't have the responsibility nor the capacity spiritually to assist you in your development because they haven't developed themselves. So you don't follow them. So when people have those rationalizations, it's not based on reality, and our culture is rooted in reality. It's based on ignorance once again, and it's them rationalizing nonsense primarily in one respect because they're still holding on to that set of perverse discordant vibrations that's affecting their thoughts in a perverse fashion, and they keep coming up with foolish rationalizations because that infection is still in their head. They've been presented with the reality, but they keep moving away from the reality and trying to embrace rationalizations to hold on to that infection. And this is one of these foolish rationalizations. Okay, so we go through that rationalization, we get beyond that. For those who claim those who claim to respect Nanasom, which simply means Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut, African ancestral religion, yet have accepted the foolish idea that you should use your proper deen around cultural people, but the white name around co-workers and family members, know that this idea is absurd for two major reasons. First, this scheme was actually a created rationalization of Achiwadifo, the whites and their offspring, spirits of disorder, fed to pseudo-revolutionaries in our community who never fully broke the cultural tie with the Achiwadifo and secretly never really wanted to be anything other than accepted and quote-unquote respected by them. Second, your misguided belief that you must live a quote-unquote double life, the quote-unquote escape detection, shows that you foolishly believe that the Abosom, Orisha, Vodou to be impotent. They are the divine forces in nature, but in your mind, the whites and their offspring are more powerful than the Abosom. Yet you have yet to realize, rather, that the Abosom, who make the planets revolve, can easily make sure you keep your job after your name, quote-unquote, change if they want you to keep the job. They will make sure that you get a loan, buy a car, etc., if that's what they want you to do. The Abosom are in control of the universe, not the whites and their offspring, the Achiwadifo, the spirits of disorder. Hiding behind a European name is not shielding you from discrimination. It is simply you engaged in a self-inflicted disorder, projecting perverse vibrations, energy within your own sunsum, your spirit, and to the sunsum, a spirit of the Nsamanfo, under the remote control of the Achiwadifo, the spirits of disorder, the whites and their offspring. Embracing no quality or truth is the culture of Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut. There is no exception to this rule. So those are some of the foolish rationalizations. And in the article, of course, we address why they are foolish and why they are self-inflicting and self-enslaving. Now then we get into the piece of how does one acquire a proper name. Your nkrabea, your divine function that's encoded within your head, within your soul, within your Okraa, is from whence your deen, your name, is ultimately derived. It's in you. The Okra, your soul, your divine consciousness, Okraa, the Kait, the Ori, Inu in the Yoruba tradition, the Selido and Vodun. It is the bearer of the nkrabea, the nkra, your divine function, that mission that you're to execute in creation. Through ODWIRA, meaning self-purification, and nsamankom, ancestral communication at your nkra, your ancestral shrine, you will be able to attune yourself to your own Okra, your soul, your divine consciousness, your Okraa, your nananom and samanfo, your direct blood ancestresses and ancestors that are in your family, that are connected to you, have been with you since birth, and the Abosom that you were born into the world with. Nobody's giving you Abosom in a pot and charging you $1,000, $2,000 for it. You incarnate with Abosom that were assigned to you by Nyame wa Nyame, Amenet, Amen. The Orisha come into the world with you. Nobody can give you that. Only the Supreme Being assigns Abosom, Orisha, Vodou to people that's pre-incarnation, before you get into a womb. So they are born with you, and you can connect directly with them. And that's why we say you will find out your Abusiaku, your ancestral clan, your deen will come through this process. Of course, we have articles on nkra, ancestral shrine communication, and Samankom, ancestral shrine, ancestral communication in the 7 senses. We have different pieces on that. We have videos where we talk about that as well. There's another piece that we address here quickly, the notion of many Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut outside of Afuraitkai take on a deen or names from Kemet and Khanat, or Knesset, Nubia, ancient Egypt, ancient Nubia, Kemet and Knesset, which is also called Khanit, ancient Nubia. For all Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut, everywhere in the world have some connection to the ancient Knesset, Nubian, Kamal, people of ancient Kemet. Our Knesset, Kamal, or Nubian Egyptian, non-anomalous Samapho work to purify us and realign us with our nkrabea, divine function. They then direct us to our specific Abusiakuo ancestral clans, great ancestral clans, be it Akan, Bakango, Ovambo, Basa, Fula, Fang, Fona, Zande, Kikuyu, or other. This is the real reason behind many of our people taking the time to study information about ancient Khanit, Knesset, Nubia, and ancient Kemet. Some believe it to be an intellectual pursuit, not realizing that their Nananom and Samampo, their ancestral spirits who are cultivated, have urged and guided us to them. So we talk about the reason. What is the real reason why there's an explosion in interest dealing with ancient Khanat, Nubia, ancient Kemet? It's not just because people began traveling back and forth and it made it popular and people started doing speeches and making videos and so forth. It's not just that. When they talk about the Champollion family discovering how to decipher the hieroglyphics, late 1700s, early 1800s, and so forth. Say Champollion the Younger got the key to, deciphering the hieroglyphics, and then his brother Champollion the Elder continued that process, and through that family, they're the ones who really got the key. What's not often known is the brother Norbert Rilliot, who was here in America. When you read about Norbert Rilliot in quote-unquote African-American history, during History Month, African-American History Month or Black History Month and all of that, he's one of the people that they bring up as far as inventor. So he revolutionized the sugar refining industry. He was an engineer, so he was born free, but then he was given the slave treatment. He eventually moved to France. He was getting tired of being given the slave treatment. Even though he was born free, he refined the sugar refining industry with his invention, with sugar refinery. He was an engineer. Changed the whole game in the entire, at that point, United States. But he was still given nigger treatment and also threatened to be enslaved. So he ended up going to France. He ended up coming back to the United States. He was given nigger treatment some more. Then he went back to France. He was tired of it. And then he began to work with the Champollion family on the decipherment of hieroglyphics in the 1800s. The so-called family that cracked the code, and of course the whites in our ring didn't crack the code. What they did was when they were in Kemet, they asked some of the native black people who were helping them haul all those coffins and items out of these pyramids and tombs. When they were cracking open these tombs and so forth, they asked them, what do these symbols mean? What is that? What's the sound that makes? What sound does this make? What sound does that make? Just like somebody can go, you read about Europeans coming amongst the Akan people in the 1600s, even before that in the 1400s, but some of the accounts in the 1600s. The Akan gold weights and the nkra symbols that we use on the gold weights, the abramu, they'll talk about their accounts of coming in contact with these kings and queen mothers, and they would reach into their containers and pull out these gold weights, and they will weigh the gold dust, and these gold weights all were not just weights of different sizes to weigh the gold dust like the Europeans had. They'll have one square gold weight that was 1 ounce, and one is half ounce, and one is a quarter ounce, and so forth, and that way they can put it on the scale and then put gold dust on the other side, and once the gold dust balances out the 1 ounce little gold weight, and say, okay, that's an ounce of gold dust. We can use that to purchase something. And they would use those gold weights. We had gold weights as well, but ours were carved into symbols. Very often, nkra symbols and other symbols, and they represented the wisdom of the culture. There are hundreds of gold weights and hundreds of symbols, and it's part of our cosmology. Ebe or proverbs associated with each one, connected to deities, connected to ancestral wisdom, and so forth. Every symbol has a specific meaning based on the geometric form, and so forth, and the teaching, divine ancestral wisdom associated with it. So the Europeans in the so-called 1600s, they write about this, and you can read about their accounts hundreds of years ago. They start asking the people, what does this symbol mean, and what does that symbol mean? And they would tell them the proverb and tell them the meaning and so forth, and we still use these exact same weights today. The same weights, you'll find the same adinkra symbols as hieroglyphic symbols in ancient Kemet, with the same symbols that we use in the adinkra symbols. You look in North Afuraitkaitnut amongst the Tuareg people, they have the same symbols. You look in Numidia, you find the same symbols. You look in Central Afuraitkaitnut, you look at the, phonetic scripts coming out of ancient Kemet that they call hieratic as well as demonic. You find those exact same symbols in the Umbramu, the gold weights of the Akan people. But the key is, hundreds of years ago, you can read accounts where they're telling what the symbols mean. Today you come forward, and of course, Akan people weren't writing English and so forth. This is from memory. You come up to today, you go to places in Akan culture where people do not read or write. They're not, quote-unquote, literate in the English language, but you ask them, what does this symbol mean? They can tell you what the symbol means. They can tell you what the proverb is, what deity is connected to, how to sound it out, all of that, over hundreds of years. And the same is true of the Medutu. The knowledge of how to read and write the Medutu has never been lost. The whites and their offspring didn't know what the symbols meant, but we know what the symbols mean. And we always have. So when they had these people working in these tombs, and you see the people, the little black people in the old pictures in the 1920s and earlier than that, 1800s, carrying out these coffins and carrying out all these items from these tombs, and the white archaeologists are directing them. They would ask those people, hey, what does that symbol mean? What does that sound like? Say that. And they learned what these symbols mean, and then they came out later and said, hey, look at what we discovered. We cracked the code and learned how to read and write the Medutu. So the key here is you have Norbert Rilliot. He was working with the Champollion family, Champollion the Elder, with the hieroglyphic, symbols, decipherment. Hold on. So that's one piece. You also have Martin Delany, great nationalist, writing in the 1800s, wrote The Origins of Races and Color, talking about the differences in melanin and skin color and the differences between white people and black people. When you read in The Origin of Races and Color, 1830s, he's writing about hieroglyphics. And he has hieroglyphics in the book, and he's trying to decipher some of them. He's talking about some of the trustery of ancient Kemet. He gets some of the information inaccurate. That's all he had at the time. But he's trying to decipher these hieroglyphics and say what they mean, and talking about Ra and talking about different deities. 1830s, one of the first well-known black nationalists in quote-unquote United States, writing about hieroglyphics. Of course, he was a black nationalist. He went to Afuraitkaitnut. He was trying to get a space there so we could relocate there and engage the nation-building process back then. He was also writing about the Yoruba tradition and talking about the Orisha in relationship to the culture of ancient Kemet in the 1830s. So from even before the end of enslavement, our people were already trying to decipher the hieroglyphics. So this is not something that's brand new that just happened 40 years ago. This has been going on for over 100 years with our people, 150 years, 170 years. It's an ancestral urge to reconnect with our culture. The Nananum and Samampo have urged us in this direction. When we say Sankofa, means to return, go and grasp from the past so you may utilize the information to bring balance to your life in the present and into the future. We have been the furthest removed geographically and culturally from Afurakanu. So our process of Sankofa is to return back to the pact we made with Inyamewa, Inyame, the Supreme Being, return to our ancestry, our pure, authentic culture going back to before our culture was corrupted by the whites and our offspring, those Nsamanfo, those Nananoma Nsamanfo of ancient Khanat, ancient Kamit, they have the responsibility to re-educate us, restore us to our great ancestral clans and direct us to what group we're from. They connect us to them, of course, those who haven't reincarnated since ancient Khanat and Kamit. They reconnect us to our parent culture that goes back over 40,000 years, but then they also reconnect us to our contemporary cultures over the past couple of thousand years in West, Central, South, Afuraitkaitnut. We have an ancestral urge. We are drawn to the culture based on that. It's not a fad like with the whites and our offspring, or just some Negroes following along the whites and our offspring and making it some pseudo-intellectual enterprise. This is an ancestral mandate. So we talk about that in this particular section, and we get into some detail about that. So then we get into the whole notion of divination. Some people, and we get more into this on our page. I'll put the link up because we don't have to go through this whole section right here. We look in the ODWIRA page, we get into this. There are some people who are receptive to Nsamanfo. They can tell you what your Nsamanfo are saying. They're clairvoyant, clairaudient, and so forth. It is your responsibility to connect with your own Abosom that governs your head and your direct blood ancestresses and ancestors to find out what clan you come from, what your function in the world is. That is your responsibility as an adult. Even normally from puberty, we start that process. Of course, we've gone through, so much we don't know who we are, where we come from, and everything else. Usually we're adults before we get involved in ancestral culture or return to it. But still, it is our responsibility to confirm through our own nkra, our soul divine consciousness, and our direct blood ancestresses and ancestors, who we are and what our function is. Even though there are a handful of people who are just clairvoyant and clairaudient and tell you your ancestral spirit just said this or she looks like this. That's nice, but it's your responsibility. You're going to have to confirm that in your own experience with your own people before you accept that. So you just don't accept it. There are people talking about they can do roots reading. Very often they give false reading. And then people start trying to embrace a culture that has nothing to do with them at all. So and that's very often the majority of the time, but even if somebody was able to hit on something that was accurate, you're still going to have to consult with your own people. That was a convention somebody just created. You have to connect with your own people. You didn't come into the world and be dependent on somebody else to find out your identity. It is your responsibility to do so and to crystallize yourself in that function. So you must establish a shrine for your own Nsamanfo and engage that process. Nobody can step into that process for you. That Sankofa process is written within you. That's your responsibility. Or else you make yourself a dependent, and that's not in harmony with divine order. So you must find that out specifically for yourself and confirm that for yourself. And every black person can do that. You don't have to be a priest, a priestess, or a mystic or anything else to do that. Just like you can communicate with your grandparents now when they make their transition, they communicate through dreams, they communicate in other ways. When you establish that ancestral shrine and be consistent, then the more consistent you are, the more they will give you. It's just like working out. You can't work out at the gym one time and say, man, what happened? I didn't become big and muscular and cut. I did go to the gym once. You set up a shrine and sit down and pour libation one time. You haven't heard anything, so you're like, I tried it, it didn't work, so I'm not going. That's like going to class to become a physician. You go to one class, you're not a physician at the end of the class, so you're like, I'm not going back. You must consistently go and engage your Nsamanfo. The more serious and consistent you are, the more information they give you. And that's our responsibility. So we go into some of that there, and then we give an experience that somebody had with regard to learning about their ancestry, and so you can read along. You can read that about the way her Nsamafo communicated with her, which she didn't realize at the time was given specific information about her specific clan, and then it was confirmed for her, but it was through her own experience. All right, so we have a few calls, and we had I saw a couple of questions. I think what we went through just now should have answered some of those or all of those questions that we had in the piece. I just want to see real quickly if that's true or not. Okay. Okay, so one question: would a spirit carry over physical traits from a past incarnation? The physical traits are going to be based on what blood circle you reincarnate through, what womb you come in through, and what contribution genetically from the father you came through. But if somehow they were related and connected, which a lot of people are, you have 2 parents, 4 grandparents, 8 great-grandparents, 16, you go back like 10 generations, you have 1,024. We calculated you go back 32 generations. There are 8 billion grandparents on that level, so a lot of us are, related. So you have some people where they are related distantly, they come together, and then you reincarnate through that womb, and then you will have similar physical characteristics than before. That has to do with blood mixture. Okay. Now let me see. Okay, so somebody had a question about the idea that you have to go through a naming ceremony to get your true name. Okay, so a regular naming ceremony, this is what normally takes place in a real sense before things got twisted. When a baby is born, of course, baby comes through, the mother and the father attune to the sunsum, the spirit of the child, attune to the Okra, or the Okraa, the soul, divine consciousness of the child, attune to the forces that govern that child, and then they attune to what the name should be, because they can attune to that. Different cultures have different ways of doing that. Sometimes they'll have an aunt or elder or elders in the family who's receptive. They can attune to the energy emanating from the child and say, okay, this is what the name really is and should be. It's a confirmation. They get confirmation from the Nsamafo. They get confirmation from the Abosom and so forth. And then they go forward and they have a naming ceremony that announces to the community what the name of the child is, based on the energy that's coming from the child. Then they know what the name should be. So that's the parents, because of course the child is a baby. They can't say what they can't tell them in that sense. And different groups have different ways of getting to that point, but it's the same point. And the ceremony is just an announcement to the community. It's also an announcement to the Abosom. They're installing that spiritual force, communally within that child. So the child is focused on that spiritual force that makes up the name, and they'll begin to respond to that from that point forward. They're no longer a citizen of the spirit realm. They're an ancestor or ancestress that just came from the spirit realm. You get that name. That name itself, remember we said the name is an entity, a spiritual entity that has its own vibrational pull. It has its own magnetosphere. It has its own orbit. It has its own magnetic field. Not only does that magnetic field attract your thoughts and your intentions and your desires and repel negative ones if it's a properly given name, but it also has its own magnetic field. It helps you ground you in the physical reality, so your spirit remains here and doesn't try to drift off and go back to the ancestral realm. So that's another reason the naming ceremony is given and institutionalized in the way that it is. So that's one part of it. But the naming ceremony itself is a declaration of the name really that the child came into the world with, and that we were able to discover and confirm and then share with the community and share with the child. But now when we're older and we've gone through a great deal of nonsense, just getting back into the culture after we're being grown and having English labels for all of our lives, and now we're going back to a traditional name. First, you have to find out what your name is. And you find out from your Okraa and your Nananoman Samanfa, your ancestors and ancestors will assist you and guide you in that process. It's already encoded within your Okraa. It's emanating from you right now. As long as you're alive and breathing, because you have the infrastructure of your spirit generates a certain collection of vibrations, you are emanating your name right now. So when you attune to that through ritual practice, your Okraa reveals that to you, directs you to information that confirms it. They'll give you some information, give you direction. Next thing you know, you're on the internet and it confirms what you heard at the shrine or in a dream or whatever it is. Different ways they will confirm it in multiple ways, so you'll be sure. Sunsum giving you that kind of guidance and everything else. Once you find out, yes, you can have a naming, and it depends on, what's going on with you in your life. If you're in Samanfa, want you to have a naming ceremony for a larger community or a small community or just one person, whatever it is. But once you find out, then you can have a naming ceremony to let the community know what your actual name is and so forth. But it's not the naming ceremony is giving you the name. You find out from your people. You find out from your Okraa, from the Abosom that govern you, the Orisha that govern you. And then you can announce it through a ritual practice so that other people know that from this point on, this set of vibrations he's embracing or she's embracing, and we are to address this person by this set of vibrations so we can align with that force now just like they're aligning with it as well. So that's what a real naming ceremony is doing. It's a confirmation and a declaration and a proclamation of what the name is and that this person is going to be functioning in a harmonious way from this point forward. And now it's time to unify around that reality. Now, some people, they'll go through little things and they just make up some stuff and put things together and say, well, you have a strong spirit, I'm going to call you Sekhmet, and we're going to have a nice big ceremony. People go through a lot of things, and they've learned that from other people, and very often it's misinformation, and sometimes they have a certain inclination, but then they don't know how to handle that inclination, and they follow what other people have done, and people are doing all kinds of things. We're talking about your spiritual infrastructure here, the birth of the name, the fact that the name exists, and you need to embrace that, attune to it, incorporate it, and then declare it to the community, those who are down with that, of course. Even those who are just new to it, it depends on you who you want to bring. But people are doing different things based on what they've heard, seen, and so forth. There are a lot of people who are going through naming ceremonies and getting names that have nothing to do with them. Some people being told they were part of one ethnic group, they're really not part of that ethnic group. Some people getting quote-unquote Kemetic names and based on a process that has no basis in reality. It's just people reading up on some stuff. They want to do something. They want to dress up. Makes them feel good to walk around and stand in poses that look like the poses they see on the wall, and it feels good. It's like a party, but in reality, it has nothing to do with their nature at all. They may name themselves, offset something, and in reality, their name should have something to do with Serket, the scorpion goddess. And just because she's not written about popularly, then they never talk about Serket. Like we did divination for a sister, and Serket manifested. It has something to do with that sister's function in creation. We're not just, whatever the Abosom show, then that's, whichever ones show up and come forward and show themselves where we can see them and they communicate with us and communicate with the individual, then that's who it is. It's not which one's the most written about and most popular or, the ones that people talk about the most. It has nothing to do with that. Reality is reality. People come into the world with Abosom associated with them, so that's what it is. So, but people do all kinds of things, but that goes back, again, to investigation. If somebody is telling you, hey, this is what you need to do, always go to your Nananoman Samanfo to confirm anything that anybody says, including everything that we're saying tonight. We're just giving you the information, but you have to go to your people that have been with you since you were born and been with you before you even incarnated, those are the people that are the experts. They are the ones that can give you the proper guidance on how you must function as an individual from that particular clan. Nobody else can give you that. Unless you had, most of us don't have people in the family who are elders and eldresses who are born into the culture and know what they're doing, because we've been conditioned with Christianity and everything else. You will be those people for the people who come behind you. But right now, typically, you don't have those people alive. The only ones you have in your family are Nana, Nom, and Samantha, which is fine. You connect with them, and they can give you the authentic culture. All right. Okay, we have a couple of calls. It's 11:41. So, get to this real quick. Michiawo, number 9412, you had a question or a comment? Okay, just listening? Okay. Okay, we have one more call real quick.
Listen,
okay, Michiawo.
If you can hear me good.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, one question. This is recent from yesterday's show when you talk about with children and how parents try, in a sense, to make sure they discipline their children. So what they know is they should behave in a way that's not too childish. My question, so in regards to adults today, let's say particularly women, if they act in a certain way, is that still reflecting of that childish behavior? Because, women are more, I guess what they say, deal with emotion. Doesn't that sometimes conflict now, even depending on how they're brought up, that they sometimes don't really understand their emotions to a child? I don't know if I'm making sense of that question.
No, I understand. And there's a couple of things. The way that women are conditioned to believe they're supposed to act in this culture is based on the way the Ashiwadifo act. Just like the way we're conditioned as men to believe that we're supposed to act in this culture is the way the Ashiwadifo act, and we're taking, our response from them. We are not conditioned, or it's not written into the culture and the songs and the movies and news reports and magazines and schools and churches and everything else like it is with their culture. It's all woven in there, but it's not woven in the culture that, Afuraitkaitnut people, you should be acting according to the deity that governs your head. That's not written into the culture. We don't get those kind of messages all our lives. We get, women are like this and men are like this, and then we end up imitating, the whites and their offspring, and the pathology that we manifest typically is a reflection of the, culture of the whites and their offspring, whether it's males or females. And we're not instinctively getting up and operating like if you're a child of a certain Abosom and manifesting that kind of behavior and living in harmony with that. We're not doing that. We're imitating and having the same kinds of relationship conflicts that the whites and their offspring have, because we're reflecting their pathology. When we get back to ourselves, we know what maturity is, we know what immaturity is, we know the differences. Like if somebody's a Bena, for example, a Tuesday born, it'd be a Kwaf Bena or an Abena. The kind of energy that governs a Kwaf Bena, Abena, the deity Bena and deity Abena is Heru Behudet and Setchima and Sekhmet and Ancient Kemet and Ogun and Iyami Abeni in the Yoruba tradition. Warrior, enforcer of divine order, fiery individual. However, they can often be very quiet, to themselves, focused, serious, and they only expend energy when it's time to expend that energy. But when it's time to expend that energy, they're explosive. But until then, they're not all in people's faces and all around trying to be the life of the party and outgoing and extroverted. They don't need all of that. They preserve their energy, they're focused, they're serious, they're internal, but when it's time to move, they move. That's natural. In this culture, if somebody's like that, as a child, they'll say, what's wrong with you? You need to be more outgoing. You need to do this. They're trying to take them out of their naturally, divinely ordered state to force them into a certain kind of behavior. Oh, you need to laugh more. You need to joke more. You're too serious. They're trying to make them into something else that they're not, and creating disorder with the individual. And then they grow up, and they're still being told that by their spouse or their relatives. Well, you know, he was always like that, and there's something wrong with him. Maybe he needs medication. He's depressed. All kinds of idiotic nonsense. And the pseudo-psychologists will tell them the same thing and maybe put them on medication. And it's, you know, it just goes across the board. So it's the culture that we live in that's perverse, that's polluted, infected. It's just like if fish are in a fish bowl, which is perverse already, and the water is polluted, then all the fish are going to operate based on, you know, the pollution that they're ingesting. So it's not, and if somebody tries to give them medicine in the water, you know, and feed them little pellets of medicine, what they need to do is take them out of the polluted environment, give them medicine, of course, and put them in a pure environment. When we embrace our culture, we create that magnetic field that repels disorder so we can be in the midst of this environment and have a clean environment that we've created for ourselves where we're repelling disorder. So that kind of immaturity that you find manifest in the female or immaturity manifest in the male who's trying to, you know, think they need to be a thug and they're 50 years old or dressing like a 16-year-old. I mean, all kinds of nonsense that we engage in, all kinds of foolish rationalizations. It comes first and foremost from the infected culture that we're a part of, and secondly, we haven't embraced our own culture as a, you know, to repel that nonsense. So once we get back to our own culture, we can, you know, we can get rid of all that nonsense.
Okay, and another question I had to ask is the names. Let's say I decide to change my name tomorrow. It's only valid to myself, and let everybody else know that I'm called this now, instead of calling from my, what they call, slave master's name. Is it only to the individuals that have to validate the name change to themselves, that they're going through all type of stupid jump from changing it from the birth certificate, from all the social security and this nonsense to validate, so the system could validate that I changed the name instead of I validate myself? I don't know if that makes sense. I hear some people, take on. Some people do take on, like, one particular brother. I will say his name because we're not supposed to know no secrets. I think named Kamit, Booker T. Coleman. He went for his way to go through the system, change his name, and give him his name Kamit. Which originally his slave name was Booker T. Coleman. Well, he changed to Kamit, but he had to go through the court system, all this stupid shit to change his name. A true African woman don't have to really have to waste her time, even to be engaged in this, to go to some other entity to really validate their change, to take back what is really theirs and change their name to what it really was instead of using these slave names. That's what I'm trying to ask.
Okay, let's use a better example of, because he's dealing with crackers and everything else. That's just a Negro. But the key is when it's really not, and that's why we put change in quotes, it's really reclaiming what your real name is. So once you have done that, culturally and ritually, you reclaimed what your name is. Now, when you go to court and change your name, quote unquote, change your name in court, that has nothing to do with validating your name. Validation comes from when you change it. Like, we went to court. Once I did that, I went to court, but the name change and the validation, quote unquote, comes through when you engage that process at the shrine and do what you need to do. The only reason you go to court is so that you don't have to continue every time you sign a check, every time you have a bill, every time you engage in any kind of business, even if somebody gets married, marriage license, whatever it is, that you're not, on one hand, constantly referencing yourself as, Bill Jackson, driver's license, bank account, Social Security card, school, work, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, constantly answering to a name that has nothing to do with you. So there are different ways to do that. Like some states is more expensive than others. Then there are others. In many states they have what's called a pauper's affidavit, where you can look that up. Where places it may be $500 or $600 to go through the name changing process. Somebody file a pauper's affidavit, they don't have to pay that. Yeah. But some people there are processes where some people have, and you can look online for this, some people have used an affidavit and then they notarized it, and they were able to just use the affidavit that they filled out and notarize it through common law and things like that, and take those documents to the different agencies so they can change their Social Security card and driver's license and things like that without having to pay. So you have to see, what the rules are in your jurisdiction. But and different people have found out different ways to do that. But the purpose for that is purely, it has nothing to do with validation of the reclaiming of your name. That's based on your culture. That's just based on, for example, for myself, once I did that, I was not going to continue to be, on one hand, being referred to as Ra Nehem Akan, or Kwesi Ra Nehem Akan, or most people would say Ra or Ra Nehem, from that point on. But then every time I signed my name, every time I signed a check, every time I signed a bill, every time I had anything, then I'm still using an English name. I was not going to continue to do that because that's not who I am. I'm not going to respond to that. Or every time somebody from an agency or anybody communicates with me, they're like, hey, is so-and-so here? And I have to respond as though that's who I am. That's not who I am. So I'm not going to respond to that, and I'm not going to identify myself as such in any capacity. That's the reason you do that through the quote-unquote legally.
Okay. And my final question, regards to our ancestors that invented good devices, or ones that are taking that good or bad, we like to call it. I was want to know how you found that with the guy who developed these, what they call with the sugar. I didn't know that he went to Egypt to translate some of the hieroglyphics. I think that's what they call it. Is anybody else besides him during the 1800s that did work in the content of translation, some of the pictures in the wall, besides him and Mark Delaney?
As far as I know, those are the only two, but that doesn't mean there weren't. You can easily find Martin Delaney's piece because you can just get his book. You can, I'm sure it's on as well on archive.org or something like that. You can download the whole book for free, but or you can just get a softcover version from like your local black bookstore, have them order it, and you'll see that he's talking about hieroglyphics and everything just from where he's at. He's studying here. It wasn't like he was in Europe or something like that. He was studying here and studying his culture. The significance about Norbert Rilliot is the fact that they, when they claim that it was the Champollion family who cracked the code, there was a black person from America who was right there in the process. So even when they claim to crack the code, an American, quote-unquote, American black or an Afurakanu person from here was already there at the quote-unquote resurgence of the language of Kemet in contemporary times. So that just shows the connection to the black people here in America. Just like they say, Offset, when she escaped from the, set, and then she had her baby, Heru, in the Delta in the north, hiding out in the north to have the baby, and Heru would later become the revolutionary. When we talk about in North America, black people reconnecting with Kemet, this goes back a couple of hundred years. This is an ancestral urge. When that quote-unquote Rosetta Stone was stolen by the whites in Alice Springs, quote-unquote found, and they used that to start deciphering and so forth. And then all this interest comes forward. At the same moment, our people are right there. One of our people is right. An Afuraitkaitnut, or Afurakanu ancestor, who used to be part of that culture, of course, reincarnates eventually into North America, is right back in the process participating in some fashion. It's just talking about an ancestral urge.
Okay. And what about Benjamin Banneker? Because even I remember there was a book, one title of the works he did back in the, I think, 17, what you want to call 11,000 hundreds back then. With his work, that I find that even was rumored or that he was, I guess, murdered in his own house. Well, before murder, they took some of his stuff that the last things that he developed before his untimely death back then. It's the same thing that goes like with any person that invents something. Usually, after a while, if they can't get from our people that create, they'll eventually just take it by force, and to claim it as their own. Because I think even with Benjamin Banneker, he created enough things, a lot of things, and a lot of people don't really know. Say that he was murdered at one point, and then all they found was the things that what he has compelled and done to really made to help America further in during the time. Because our people are very talented in all aspects, but like the parasites, like you referred to, they find ways to take whatever is needed and then call it their own because they don't really create nothing. Crazy. So yeah, and I know This is good. This is good. It's good. I'm probably have to re-listen back to the archives because I did miss some things. So I did have some questions, but if I missed it, I'll ask you again next time. All right. Thank you again.
Okay. I appreciate the call. Okay. So there is like 3 minutes left. Even with this overtime, the most they give you is up until 12 o'clock. So we'll be back on tomorrow with Egua Marketplace. We'll send out a notification to let everybody know who's going to be the guests on the show tomorrow, 9 p.m. May I say for everybody tuning in, please support our soft cover publications. It supports the work that we are doing. And they only range between $8 and $11. We have 15 books out now. We're working on more. We just have to, have the time and the funds to be able to generate those, be able to publish more. We have a number of books, actually, that we have information. We have to have the time to get them out, publish them, and release them. So we generate these. We try to generate the resources to cover the operating expenses so we can continue to publish. We actually have a number of books out that are on deck that we would like to get out as soon as we can. So your support of the softcover publications assists us in doing that, and to continue to give the free presentations. We give away free books, of course, as well, and different presentations in different areas of the country, including your areas. You can contact us if you want us to come to your area as well. So, but please support the softcover publications for the 15 books. And we will be back on tomorrow. If you have a question we couldn't get to, it's only 1 minute left, so just send us an email on Facebook or on the regular ODWIRA.com site, and then we can answer that question because we only have a minute left. So, Yedase, we thank you. Yebeshiapio, we will meet again, and head